So hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This is part 1 of What if Quirkless Deku unlocks chakra control and Sharingan from Secret Book? A 6-year-old Deku discovers an ancient shinobi lab, where he unlocks the secrets of chakra natures like wind, fire, and water, and awakens the legendary Sharingan. With these newfound abilities, he's ready to defy all odds and take the world by storm. This part is packed with thrilling moments featuring Deku, Momo, and Mount Lady. Remember, the next part will drop once we hit 200 likes. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the bell icon to stay updated. Now, grab your headphones, sit back, and enjoy the story. Chapter 1, The Ancient Lab. Izuku sat down, tears beginning to form in his eyes. What happened? Why did we stop being friends with Kachin? I thought I did everything right. After a few minutes of sitting and crying, Izuku pushed himself up and began to walk. I'll just have to prove myself. Maybe then I can be a hero and Kachin will respect me. Yeah, full steam ahead. BM, and he tripped. Ow. Izuku pushed himself up. What tripped me? Izuku turned his head back. A root? No, it looks too rigid to be a plant. What is it? Izuku bent over and grabbed the object of his clumsiness. Clitter clatter. It won't budge. Click. HHH. Oomph. Izuku grumbled as he rubbed his head. In his attempt to pull on the bar, he opened it and fell to the ground. He looked at the open hatch. An opening? Izuku peered down the hatch in the ground. He could see a ladder embedded in one side of the wall, and the opening seemed to go down forever. A part of Izuku wants to run and find the nearest police officer, but the childhood curiosity was starting to flare up. Despite his mature mindset and intelligence, he was still 6. And so, with a sigh, he began to climb down the ladder. When he arrived at the bottom, he could barely see. The only light that appeared was from the hatch opening at the top. It's dusty, and the air is stale. Ah, HACHO. Izuku sneezed at the apparent dust. Where's a light switch? Whoosh, as if reading his mind, touches adorning the walls lit on fire, filling the long corridor in an orange glow. Izuku winced from the light, and suddenly hid his eyes before opening them. Taking a step forward, he began to look around the corridor. It looked like he was surrounded by stones in various patterns. Torches adorned the walls as far as he could see. Soon he came across a set of doors. Written on them was a language he could not quite understand, despite a few Japanese kanji mixed in. He tried to grab onto the door handle. All he got was a clatter, as the doorknob refused to budge. Izuku quickly moves to the corresponding door on the other side. Locked. Just my luck. Shaking his head, Izuku continued heading the direction he was, before coming across another set of doors, and once again tried to open them. No luck. Another set and another attempt. You know what? I'm just going to ignore closed doors, and walk to the end. Maybe there's an open room. After walking down the long corridor, Izuku comes across a trio of doors. Dang it! Well, one of them has to be unlocked. Deciding to try his luck, he went for the center door at the very end wall. Click. Cree. Aha! Walking in, he was plunged into more darkness before 4 torches lit up. In the center of the room was a desk and a shelf on said desk. Walking towards the desk, he circled it, hoping it would not suddenly eat him. After swallowing his fear, he looked more closely at the desk and shelf and found 5 of what appeared to be books. He pulled the first on the right out and cracked it open. No good, it's written in the same language as the doors. Izuku sat down and thought, balancing out the pros and cons of continuing this path. Seeing how it couldn't hurt, he grabbed the 4 other books and took them with him. It took him about 15 minutes just bringing the books up the ladder, but the hard part was done. I shouldn't leave the opening here. Better close it. Walking up the stairs to his apartment, Izuku heaved the 5 books in his hands. He had peeked at one of the books while catching a breather. It seemed like the book were more of a series of journals. Maybe the words of somebody long past? Izuku knocked on his door, and after a moment for waiting, his mother Inko Midoriya opened. Hi Izuku, what are you doing home so early? And why aren't you with Katsuki? Izuku gave a sheepish laugh. I got separated and lost. Heh. Inko groaned. Izuku, next time you get separated, you come straight home, you hear me? I do not want you getting more lost or worse, kidnapped. Speaking of which, what are you carrying? Izuku gave a tired grin as he sat down the journals on the coffee table. I came across them on my way home. I want to learn how to read them. Inko gave a murmur of surprise. Oh, let me take a look. She grabbed the book on top and gave it a glance before paling a bit and giving a hesitant laugh. This looks more advanced than I thought. Izuku gave a small nod. I know, but I still want to try. Could I use the computer to try? Inko bit her lip as she considered the pros and cons. After a few minutes of contemplation, she had her answer. All right, I'll let you use it. Izuku's face brightened. On the condition that you consult me if you want to talk to someone else. All right. He couldn't nod his head fast enough. 2 weeks later, it took Izuku about a week and a half to locate the exact long used in the journals. As it turns out, there were only 3 experts in all of Japan on the ancient and long-dead tongue that could both read and write it fluently. 2 were active researchers and university professors, and the third was a retired early 70s man. 2 days prior, Izuku begged his mother to let him make an email to the retired researcher. He wanted to set up a video call in order to get lessons of the language. After 2 hours of begging, Inko finally relented with the compromise that she be present in the room during this video call. They agreed on a time, and Izuku was simply waiting until he was called. The moment the call came on, he answered hastily. "Ah, hello? I am Izuku Midoriya." The face of a gray-haired, blue-eyed man appeared. "Oh, you're quite a young man, aren't you?" An hour later, Izuku and the researcher had both been acquainted. With a newly found hope, sparks came to life in Izuku's eyes as he watched various examples of ancient texts fly by. "What do you plan on doing with this information?" Izuku gave a sheepish laugh. "I found an old journal written in this language, and I wanted to be able to read it." The old man gave a look of surprise. "Oh, do you tell? Do you plan on sharing your research with others?" Izuku rubbed his shoulder with a shrug. I mean, it's not my life's goal. I really want to be a hero. The problem is that I'm quirkless." Sitting on his bed, Inko began to let loose a few tears. "So what? Records were meant to be broken and glass ceilings were meant to be shattered. There is a first time for everything. And if you want to be a quirkless hero, then go for it. So long as you have some kind of support, I believe you can do great things. And just between you and me, I'm quirkless as well." On the beat, Inko began to cry, even more tears both of joy and sorrow. "What made you agree to teach me, sir?" Izuku asked curiously. "Sigh, I'm an old man, as you've no doubt noticed. Even though I took care of myself quite well, I won't be around forever. And sometimes life can be cruel. I was born unable to conceive of my own child. Yes, I have adopted, but my son has shown no interest in this form of studies. It warms an old man's heart that there exists someone out in the world that is genuinely interested in such an old topic. Even if you do go the hero route, I will be glad that I could provide such knowledge to someone. Perhaps you could even teach a future child or grandchild of your own. Who knows?" Izuku nodded, extremely grateful to his new teacher. "Thank you for the lesson, Mr. Yamanaka." 2.5 months later, after that first meeting, it took about 2 months for Izuku to read the ancient language fluently, and that was with a 2-session per week schedule after school. Another 2 weeks for him to learn to write almost perfectly. With a few follow-up lessons, and Izuku graciously thanked his teacher. His instructor wished Izuku luck in life, no matter what path he took. And with that, Izuku cracked open the first journal to start reading. "I suppose I should begin somewhere. I'm an ancient relic of a long bygone era. If only Sensei and my idiot teammates could see me now. After 2,765 years, my machine for creating new bodies has long since stopped working, and with what has happened to the shinobi world I once knew, any chance of me prolonging my own life has vanished. Who knew Sensei was right in a way? The best way to remain alive is to pass my knowledge down and not hoard it. Although perhaps I'm simply making excuses, but I am tired, epically, of living for so long. These journals will outline my journey, the events I took place in, as well as some important history and figures. I leave everything to whoever can find it and learn everything. And if I find you in the afterlife and you have not learned everything I have left you, I will hunt you down." Izuku nervously swallowed before returning to the book. Now, where was I? Ah yes, also embedded in this book is how to unlock chakra and how to take ownership of my hideout. This may seem like odd words to you, but it will all make perfect sense in the future. Orochimaru, Snake Sannin, and student of the 3rd Hokage. Chapter 2, The Spiritual and Physical. "Izuku! Breakfast! You can return to your book later," Izuku's mother called out. He put the journal down as he got up from his bed. First thing that morning, after waking up, he continued where he left off the night prior. Whoever Orochimaru was, he certainly could entertain Izuku's mind, summoning meteors, flooding valleys, destroying mountaintops, bringing forth massive creatures, and even reviving the dead. Although that last one kind of freaked Izuku out. If even a fifth of what's written in here was true, then I could become an incredible hero with it all. Izuku thought of the possibilities as he changed his clothes. He was skeptical, but for someone to go to these lengths means there must be some truth to it. Izuku reached out to grab the journal, but decided not to take it. Better not risk it. Caution might destroy it. "All right, Izuku, I want you to have a good day. If you have any problems, don't hesitate to call me." Inko smiled as she gave her son a big hug, dropping him off at school. Kids were staring at him, likely looking to place their claws on him, but holding back. "Bye, Ka-san!" Izuku gave a big smile until Inko was out of sight, dropping it, eyes moving around in fear. He quickly ran inside before the others could surround them, anger flashing on their faces. Once arriving at his class, he sat down, pulling out some paper, and drowned out the other children. "There are so many jutsu that have existed in history, I can't learn all of them, But maybe I can learn the ones that are most ideal for myself? If the journal was correct, the jutsu rankings are E rank, D rank, C rank, B rank, A rank, and S rank, otherwise known as forbidden jutsu. Stop muttering, Deku. Izuku lifted his head, making eye contact with Katsuki Bakugo. He flinched back and began to act submissive. Why yes, Keikaken. Izuku trued his head back, this time remaining quiet. Forbidden jutsu rank in 3 categories: externally destructive, internally destructive, and morally destructive. Moral jutsu would be like the reanimation jutsu. They violate the laws of nature. The other 2 usually go hand in hand, with exceptions. Shadow clones are internally destructive, while, say, the summoning jutsu, depending on the summon, is externally. Izuku nodded to himself as he wrote down his notes. He needed a solid plan, otherwise he might end up killing himself from getting overzealous. I should probably stick with E and D rank for now, like the substitution jutsu, clone jutsu, and elemental jutsu like fire style, ember. I'll have to go through the library at the hideout in order to locate more lower rank techniques. Hopefully, the journals help with learning the difference between elemental jutsu and non-elemental. Content with his plan, he folded up his training schedule and put it in his pocket. However, his situational awareness didn't pick up Katsuki reading over his shoulder. Jutsu? Izuku rushed home, opening the door and slamming and closed. Inko jumped in shock. Izuku! Don't you usually hang out with your friends by this point? Izuku stopped, shaking his head. No, they don't want to hang out with a quirkless kid. Inko froze before scooping Izuku in a hug. He returned it before asking his request. Can I go back to reading the journal? Inko looked at him for a moment. Only if you promise to take care of any homework you have immediately after. Izuku couldn't nod his head fast enough. Authority given, he wriggled out of his mother's embrace, rushing to his bedroom and dropping his backpack in the corner. Izuku grabbed Orochimaru's journal, jumping onto his bed, and began to read, being absorbed into what chakra was. Pretty soon, he had read through the journal entry, and the next 2 and an hour had passed. If what I read was correct, then I need to get my homework done before attempting this. It could take more than 2 hours just to get it right. Well, let's get to work. For the next hour, he spent his time working on all his homework, math, Japanese, and vocabulary. He was lucky that night. Usually he had more to learn. After memorizing the instructions that were laid out by Orochimaru, Izuku sat down in a lotus position. He had to look it up, but was glad it didn't change in history. Mom! I did my homework. Could you not bother me for a while? Inko replied from the living room. Dinner is in an hour, but so long as it's not illegal, I don't mind. Thanks! And no, it's not illegal. Izuku closed his eyes and took deep breaths, purging his mind of all rush thoughts. In and out. He began to look inwards and try to see something, anything. Meditation was something many shinobi did to relax overactive chakra networks. Orochimaru theorized that if done properly, one could unlock a chakra network the same way, but only if they have complete focus. This put Izuku at both an advantage and disadvantage. As a child, his mind is already clear of most ideas, thought, and memories an adult or even teenager would have. But his mind and body are far more hyper. However, if Izuku was one thing, it was determined. 10 minutes passed, and he hadn't moved a muscle. His butt was starting to hurt, but he refuses to get up. Another 10 minutes, and his body finally relaxed in a state like that of one when somebody wakes up refreshed. And soon, his mind has cleared up everything, leaving himself in state as some would call Zen. And like a twinkling light, he could see it. A dim blue glow from a far-off view. He began to reach out for it, unintentionally, repeating the same action in the real world, and when he grabbed it, everything went black. He opened his eyes to a dim room. He forgot to keep the light on, but that didn't matter to him. His body felt lighter, faster, and stronger. He followed the next step, placing his hands in a tiger symbol. It was a bit difficult to do the hand sign, but he was determined to see this through. And like a rush of energy, his body felt incredible. He felt he could lift 3 times his own weight, run twice as fast, or even take more punches. It's beautiful and incredible. Was this what humans could once do? Izuku was tearing up a bit. He remembered a chakra exercise that boosted strength. It was the basis for the slug Sanin Tsunade's monster strength, but that didn't matter. He pushed the energy to his legs and arms before grabbing his twin-size mattress. Normally a 6-year-old wouldn't be able to lift it, but for Izuku that didn't matter. With a huff, he lifted the mattress above his head. I did it! I did it! He dropped his mattress on the bed, jumping for joy. The loud noise prompted Inko to walk in. What did you do, Izuku? She asked as she closed the door. This gave Izuku pause, as he hadn't informed his mother of what was written in the journal quite yet. In a split-second decision, he threw Cat Eye into the wind and repeated his original feat of strength. Izuku, why you have a cute quirk? Inko looked close to tears as joy filled her face. Izuku put the mattress back down and shook his head. Not a quirk. Inko started to cry despite confusing filling her face. What do you mean? Izuku gave a sad smile. This is something humans could once do. It was lost to time, but I relearned it. Chakra, chakra? Izuku nodded. With chakra, humans could do anything, and it was far more impressive and powerful than quirks. Once could summon giant animals, or spit out a tsunami. A rare few could even transform the earth, or even revive the dead. Inko froze in shock, unable to process the statements. Can I tell you what I read in the journals? Chapter 3, Return to the Lab and Good Parenting. Click. Is this Izuku? Izuku turned his head to look up to his mother, before nodding. Yeah, Mom. I found this after I got lost. He heaved open the door before walking forward to take a step down. Inko stops him with a hand. I'll go first. I want to make sure it's safe. But Mom dash. No buts. It's a mother's job to make sure you're safe. Even if you've gone down here before, doesn't mean it can support the weight of a grown adult. Hesitantly, Izuku took a step back as Inko began to descend the ladder. Once Izuku was down, he looked up at his mother as she tried to see her way in the darkness. How do you, ACHO? Izuku giggled. I did the same when I first came in here. And like last time, the torches came on with a loud whoosh. Come on, Mom, it's a very big place. They began to walk down the pathway as Inko looked around, taking in details. However, unlike last time, Izuku could understand what was written on the doors. The first two doors simply said ninjutsu and taijutsu. Don't bother, Mom, the doors are locked until I take ownership. Inko had a look of perplexation. Take ownership? Izuku rubbed his neck. I'll explain once we reach the last room. Izuku and Inko pass a second set, this time saying Jinjutsu and Kenjutsu. What do the doors say? Izuku looked back at his mother. They're libraries. The door plates say what's inside. We've passed Ninjutsu, the art of expelling chakra. Taijutsu, the art of hand-to-hand. Jinjutsu, the art of sensory manipulation, and Kenjutsu, the art of swordplay. Inko flinched back. You are not going to be play with swords until you're older. Got it. I don't want to have to worry about if you cut off a finger because you weren't careful. Izuku stopped waving his hands around while trying to calm his panicking mother. I was planning on it when I was older, like 8 or 9. Not when I'm this small. She paused, considering his proposal. Fine, but only after you take some classes under a master first. It's like waving a giant knife around. You could cut someone else or yourself without intending to. Izuku agreed with his mother. He was kind of afraid of disfiguring somebody. They began walking and came across 2 more doors, Izuku noting that this was the last pair before the trio at the end. He told his mother what they were as they walked past. Fuinjutsu, or the art of seals, and elemental Kekai Genkai Jutsu, the studies of elemental-based bloodlines. Izuku noted that he'd have to test himself if he had a latent Kekai Genkai, and if not, test whoever he might take as a future student. Soon enough, Izuku and Inko came across the trio of doors at the end. Izuku looked at the 2 doors. The right said, Forbidden Jutsu, and the left said Genetic Samples. He elected to ignore these 2 doors until a later date. What was listed on the center door were the rooms sealed off until he unlocked it, likely to ward off thieves who didn't bother to learn the language. It simply said, workroom, personal quarters, laboratory, training room, and personal vault. Izuku didn't need to guess what was in the vault. Orochimaru did say what was in there were unique things, one of their kind, and like everything else in the hideout would wither away if not properly preserved. Summoning contracts, his personal blade, Kusanagi, the Konoha Forbidden Scroll, a sample of the 8 Tails Chakra, and the Samahata. According to the journal, Orochimaru prioritized it over the other swords as unlike its counterparts, it was alive and sentient. The others could withstand the test of time, it could not. Without a supply of chakra to keep it alive, it would wither away, leaving not even a handle. Although, Izuku did read something about Orochimaru being sentimental. While he didn't plan on wielding Samahata himself, perhaps he could find a good user for it. He opened the door and entered, his mother following. What the journal said, I need to take ownership of this place in order to access the libraries of knowledge. Inko looked around the empty room before focusing on the empty desk. How do you do that, Izuku? Izuku took a few steps forward, gathering chakra in his left thumb, before whipping out a small razor blade. Before Inko could say anything, he cut said thumb and slammed his palm on the desk. Izuku, what are you dash? When his chakra-filled blood touched the desk, an invisible seal made itself known, and the room began to transform. Shelves of books began to rise from the ground as 4 doors revealed themselves. 2 opposite of each other, and the last 2 opposite of the entryway. Izuku dropped the razor on the desk and pulled out a band-aid to stop the healing. His chakra control was not at the point that he could stop blood flow and accelerate minor healing, like contract summoners could. Inko quickly leaped forward and grabbed the dangerous object. Izuku, why would you ever do something so dangerous, and why didn't you tell me? Inko's bottom lip was quivering, and she looked ready to cry, although Izuku couldn't tell. The room finished as Izuku sighed. I'm sorry, Mom. It was necessary. Inko looked down. Hick, why was it necessary? And why keep it from me? Don't you know that only make me worry more? You're only 6 and yet you act like a teenager most of the time nowadays. A part of me wants Hick for you to go back, but even I know that won't happen. It doesn't stop me from worrying about you so much it hurts. At this point, Izuku started to cry, apologizing profusely, and trying to explain the situation. It took them a good 10 minutes before they were both calm enough for Izuku to explain the situation. By this point, Izuku sat on the ground while Inko took the only chair in the room. It's a blood seal. It requires both my chakra and blood to keep me into this place. Inko butted into his explanation. Then I could have taken you to a doctor and gotten some blood drawn. You didn't need to cause bodily harm. Izuku looked down, guilty. According to the J Journal, it has to be fresh from the wound blood. No less than a minute since it was removed. Shinobi often bit their thumbs when they needed blood, but I didn't want to cause a major wound. I'm sorry. Inko nodded along. What's a blood seal? He looked at her. A blood seal uses blood as a catalyst to activate its design purpose. Basically, I took ownership of this place and only I can come and go as I please. I can let someone else in or add them to an approval list of sorts, but only I have full access. The only downside is anyone with direct blood relations to me, uncle, aunt, parent, grandparent, sibling, niece, nephew, child, or grandchild, can also come and go as they please. For Orochimaru, this wasn't a problem because he had no living relatives, so he never bothered to get better security. Inko nodded before looking Izuku directly in the eyes. You know, I'm not angry about you doing that. You clearly knew what you were doing. What I was angry about is you couldn't trust me enough to tell me. Izuku flinched. But I understand. The other adults, your teachers, the doctor, even your father, you've lost nearly all trust you had in adults. But know this, my precious treasure, I'm your mother, and I know you're a good person. So long as my heart beats and I breath, I will always support you. His father left when Izuku was 4. No explanation was given, but he always thought it was because he was quirkless. Izuku began to cry as he reached out for a hug. Mommy. Hick, Inko enveloped him in a hug. Let it all out, Izuku. He started to squeeze very tight. I want to leave. It hurts so much, and I just want to leave. Inko continued to hug him as he cried into her shoulder, getting her shirt wet, but that didn't matter to her. All that mattered was Izuku. Where do you want to leave? Hick asked school. Everyone is mean and I don't like it. I ask for help and nobody helps. The teachers do nothing and the kids, they beat me up with quirks. For the first time, possibly in her life, Inko saw red. They lied to me. I voiced my complaints to them after seeing the bruises, and they said Izuku never mentioned anything. I trusted them. But before she stormed off, she slowed down and thought rationally. Did Katsuki ever hurt you? She hoped it wasn't true, that her best friend's son wasn't a bully, but hopes can often be disappointing. Izuku nodded, fear visible in his form. K-cause CCC-chan is often the meanest. The burns hurt so much, and I'm so scared. All I wanted to do was play, but I get beaten up. I don't want to be Deku. I want to be Izuku. Inko had a look cross her face. Deku? But that means useless, or if you want to go old, wooden puppet. My son is not useless. Mom, you're crushing me. Sorry, Izuku, your mother is just very angry at your school. I didn't get lost. Inko blinked. Izuku's words had come out so quietly that she almost didn't hear them. What? Izuku spoke again, louder this time. I didn't get lost, I was left behind. Keikachan hoped an animal would hurt me, and I would never bother him again. I only found this place by accident. Inko rubbed his fluffy hair, trying to bring some comfort to him. Do you want to be homeschooled? Izuku nodded. All right, but I don't have enough to get a babysitter on the rare events I have to go out. When that does happen, I'm going to lock the door, and if somebody knocks, you will not answer it. Promise me you'll do this, and I'll get you enrolled in a homeschool program, okay? Izuku nodded, as his eyes started to droop, likely tiring himself out from his emotional breakdown. Is there a place for you to sleep here? Izuku pointed to a specific door, and Inko took that cue, carrying him over, opening the door and entering a small room. A large bed could be seen in the center, with a small door on the left and a desk on the right. She placed Izuku on the soft but firm bed and opened the door to the left. It was a small bathroom, toilet, small sink and a shower, nothing too fancy. She turned on the faucet, and to her surprise water came flowing out. Izuku hadn't explained everything about this place yet, so she simply turned it off and closed the door. She looked down at her only child, who was starting to wrap himself up in the thin blanket. I'm glad I dealt with this before it got worse. I don't know exactly what would happen if I ignored this, but I have a good idea. And I hate it. A mother is supposed to die before her child, not the other way around. While Izuku rested, Inko began to plan out how to tear down that school of his, and if she couldn't bring it down, she would drag it through so much mud that not even the janitor could get another job elsewhere. Never get between a mother and her cub. Unknown to Inko and Izuku, when the rooms were unfrozen form stasis, Izuku's close proximity and active chakra network had caused 5 genetic samples, blood samples, to ripple. The most prominent of the two, Madara Uchiha and Sasuke Uchiha. Chapter 4. Chakra Control and Chakra Nature. Hey Mom! Inko jumped out of surprise after closing the entry door. She quickly whirled around to see Izuku hanging from the ceiling. Izuku, you scared me, and what did I say about practicing when I wasn't home? Izuku pouted, clearly upset. But I've been getting so good, I just thought that. Inko took a deep breath and put a smile on her face. I know, it's just if something happens to you when I'm not here you could seriously hurt yourself. I don't think I could rationally handle myself in that kind of situation. It's been about 1 month since Inko went into the bunker with Izuku. He explained in detail what he knew and was present. Deciding on a plan, they took a few scrolls containing E-rank ninjutsu for Izuku to practice, but only after he learned chakra control exercises. She didn't want him passing out from chakra exhaustion, especially if she wasn't nearby to help. Tell you what, I don't have to work tomorrow, and the weather is supposed to be good. How about we go to the lake, practice swimming, and you can learn some water walking? Izuku looked excited. Yes. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. He paused, an idea coming to mind. Could we see what my affinity is? Inko blinked. She had been told about the 5 basic elements and how they balanced out. Izuku would eventually need to know what his element was in order to preform higher-level jutsu, but she shouldn't be surprised. From what she could understand, Izuku was extremely talented and likely was bored out of his mind for the past month. And she did recall Izuku taking what looked like a piece of blank paper from the bunker. Alright, but let's go outside. We don't want to destroy anything important. Izuku nodded, quickly running to his room. Despite his mature state of mind, childhood energy does tend to take over from time to time. She waited by the door as Izuku returned with the blank paper. This is chakra paper. It tells me what affinity I have. Inko opened the door and proposed a question. How does it tell you? Izuku looked excited. Well, the paper absorbs any chakra I push into it. If it burns, it's fire. If it crinkles, it's lightning. If it crumples, it's earth. If it gets soggy, it's water. And if it gets cut, it's wind. If I have 2 or more elements, the stronger of the 2 or more presents itself first. Inko nodded as they reached the nearby courtyard. Ready? She nodded in confirmation. Izuku's hand glowed momentarily before fading. They waited a moment, and the paper reacted. First it split in 2, and then both sides caught fire. Izuku panicked, quickly dropped the burning pieces, which disintegrated before they could hit the ground. I have wind and fire. 2 elements, yahoo! Izuku began to dance in joy. His mother, however, was still. Did the fire come from his father? The same one that abandoned him? It makes sense. Wind is the closest to telekinesis, and fire obviously would work with fire breathing. How do I? She looked at the happy Izuku. No, I promised I'd support him and I will. Who cares if he inherited it from his father? It's his, not Hisashi's, period. My strong little man. Just be careful not to get too strong too fast. Izuku stopped dancing, nodding his head. I will, Mom. Izuku, are you ready to go? Inko's child ran out from his room in swimming shorts she bought earlier and towel in hand. He nodded. You didn't hide your journal in there, did you? She pointed to the towel as he shook his head. He knew that bringing the journal to the lake had a risk of destroying it. Inko opened the door, with Izuku following. Closing and locking, they went to wait at the bus stop. About 10 minutes passed as Izuku just excitedly mumbled to himself about the water walking technique. A bus pulled up, and the doors opened. Going for a beach day or a lake day? Inko paid the correct fare for herself, and because Izuku was under 8 years old, he rode for free. Lake might be a bit cold for the ocean. The driver nodded as mother and son found some seats. The bus ride was about 45 minutes, but Izuku occupied himself with observations of people's quirks and using his mother's phone as a notepad. Soon enough they arrived at their destination. It was a small-sized lake just outside of the Mustafa district and had a few other people present, but not enough that Izuku would bother them with water walking. Inko, carrying Izuku, plopped their towels and Izuku down on the little wooden dock that was present. She then jumped into the water with a splash, and after a moment returned to the surface. Okay, do you want to start practicing? He nodded. Don't worry about failing, I'm here to catch you. Izuku nodded, a little hesitant. Izuku placed his hands in a tiger sign before placing a foot down. After it stuck to the surface, he placed his second foot and held the form before taking an experimental setup. Splash, that was all he needed before he lost concentration and fell in, his mother grabbing him before he fully submerged. He coughed from the small amounts of water he got in his mouth. You all right, Izuku? He nodded, spitting out the lake water. Inko placed him back on the dock, and he tried again and again and again. But each time Izuku tried, he made it a little further. By the 5th time, he could take a step forward without falling, and by the 15th time, he could take multiple careful steps. But soon minutes turned to 3 hours, and after dozens of attempts, he could now comfortably walk on the water, but only with complete concentration. Inko floated to the dock, dried her hand, and checked the time. Izuku, the bus comes in 15 minutes. We have to call it a day. But Mom, I think I can do this. I just need a few more. No, Izuku, we need to get home and it's the last bus. Do you want to walk home instead? Izuku hung his head, but could see his mother's point. No, Mom. Izuku took a few steps and climbed onto the dock and grabbing the smaller of the 2 towels. Wiping his face, he smiled up to his mom. If you want, we can try later today when you take a bath. Izuku closed his eyes and thought before nodding. Okay, Mom. After both were sufficiently dried, they went to the stop and waited about 5 minutes before a bus pulled up. Inko pulled out her all-day bus pass, and they found their seats. They made sure to place their towels down first, so they wouldn't get seats too wet from swimwear. Before long, Izuku nodded off from the fun at the lake. Seeing an opportunity, Inko opened her camera app and took a photo of the sleeping angel by her side. She then posted the photo to her social media for the few friends she had and placed the phone down. Inko rubbed her son's fluffy head for a few minutes before being interrupted. Her phone was buzzing, likely a phone call. It wasn't a number she recognized but answered anyway. Hello? A tired male voice answered. Is this Inko Midoriya? This is her. Hello there, my name is Yakumaru Mara, or just Mara-san. I work for the Hero Public Safety Commission. I'm calling to set up a meeting regarding your lawsuit against the Mustafa Public Nursery and Elementary Schools. Inko was confused. Why is the HPSC calling about that? The lawsuit is a civilian suit after all. The man let out a tired sigh. You would think that, but your lawsuit quotes the usage of quirks unlawfully, and the HPSC is usually the foremost in quirk law, creation and management. As such, we have to stick our hands in a minor case when quirks are in play. Inko nodded, a hum of confirmation. When does a good time for a meeting with me sound? Inko gave a quiet hum of consideration. Well, I'm not working the next week and a half, so any time in that frame could do. The HPSC employee grunted in confirmation. I'll set up a date, time and email you. Hope to see you there to discuss settlements. Mara hung up before she could reply. Inko blinked before considering the wording used in the call. Discuss settlements, and why them of all government organizations? Is it only because of quirks or something else? Chapter 5. The HPSC and Wind Style. Wind Style. Air pellets. Izuku ran through the 4 hand signs, a little slow compared to experienced shinobi, and spit out 4 compressed blasts of air. Due to their small size, lack of surface area, and slower speeds, they didn't have all that much impact force. If they hit somebody, they had about the same feel as those pre-quirk nerf bullets. It was Izuku's first Wind-style ninjutsu, and while it didn't have any combat potential, aside from irritation, it could be used to, say, supplement a fire jutsu. Really, it was the only jutsu Inko would allow him to learn unless they were in an open area. There was another jutsu that Izuku was eyeing but was forbidden until Inko could keep an eye on him, due to the likelihood of hurting himself. Fire Style. Ember was a high-class E-rank jutsu that sent sparks from one's fingertips. The most they could do was leave small burns, and while Inko was supportive of her child, she wasn't going to take an unnecessary risk, especially at his younger age and lack of experience with jutsu. After learning these 2 jutsu, mastering them and mastering walker walking, Izuku hoped to move on to D-rank ninjutsu like Fire Style, Miniature Fireball, and Wind Style, Air Bullet. Each of these jutsu sent out a small sphere of its respective element from the caster's mouth and were considered the weaker variants to the C-rank Fire Style, Fireball and Grand Fireball, as well as the B-rank Wind Style, Air Bullets, respectively. Of course, Izuku knew that no matter how talented he was, he would simply have to wait a couple of years before his mother would trust him with ninjutsu higher than D-rank. However, his slightly overprotective mother has told him that if he doesn't use it maliciously, he can learn C-rank Jinjutsu. Wind Style. Air Pellets. Izuku ran through the signs again slighter faster than last time. He took aim and shot at the stacked paper cups his mother had bought him for target practice. It was difficult, aiming for the highest cups without knowing the others over, but it was a good way to practice and hone his aim. At least, he was preoccupied while his mom was out. Inko held onto the bus pole as she watched her phone's map. She had never been to the HPSC main branch before, and it was quite a ride away. Located in central Tokyo, it was a large building according to the images she looked up. Most government buildings tended to be on the large side, so Inko wasn't too surprised. Before she knew it, the bus called out her stop. After thanking the bus driver, she jumped off phone in hand, backpack strapped firmly. The green-haired woman looked around, noting the crowded area. She could see a few large chain stores, a McDonald's, and a couple of coffee shops. She noted that she was about 25 minutes early, and that the office was only about 3 blocks away. She took one look at the coffee shops. Should I get a coffee? We may not be well off, but we are comfortable enough. It took Inko a minute to decide before making up her mind, entering the less crowded coffee shop, coincidentally the local shop rather than the franchise. Inko got in line and waited for the 3 in front of her to order. She was confident in what she wanted, and a little boost of energy for the meeting was a nice bonus. 1 small black coffee, 2 teaspoons of sugar, and a pint of 2% milk. The barista nodded, writing the order down. Anything else? Inko shook her head. Here or to go? To go, please. Inko sat down at one of the open chairs after paying for the coffee. She only needed to wait about 3 minutes before her name was called. She thanked the barista, left a small tip, and exited the coffee shop, sipping on her cup. She leisurely walked towards the main office for the HPSC and entered the large sliding glass door. There was a waiting room off to the right, and 2 receptionists at the front. One of them was busy helping a middle-aged man, and the other was looking at her computer. The receptionist glanced up at Inko after a moment. I can help you here, Mississippi. Inko walked up to the desk. Yes, I'm here for a meeting with Mara. My name is Inko Midoriya. The receptionist nodded as they glanced at their timesheet. You're a little early, but Mara-san will see you in about 5 minutes. If you want to take a seat, go right ahead. Inko nodded, thanking them. Before she knew it, 5 minutes were up and Mara had called for her. Hello, Ms. Midoriya. It's nice to meet you. I'm Yakumura Mara. The sunken-eyed man stood up to shake her hand, stumbling a bit. Inko noted his desk was covered in piles of papers, and a few disposable coffee cups were scattered around the small office. He noted the coffee she was holding herself. Oh, you went there as well? They make great coffee, a little more expensive than the franchise, but still worth it in my opinion. The government worker gestured to the open chair as he took his seat behind the desk. Inko followed suit as she waited for him to gather the appropriate documents. All right, sorry about the mess. We're overworked and understaffed, as you can plainly see. Kids these days would rather be heroes than government employees. Now, you are suing the Mustafa public school system, specifically the preschool and elementary programs, correct? Why, yes. My son, Izuku, was abused by his peers, and rather than step in and help him, teachers and staff would rather ignore him. Nobody told me anything, so I didn't even find out until about a month and a half ago. Inko clenched her near-empty coffee cup. A frown developed on Mara's face. I see. That was around the time you pulled him out from public schooling, correct? Inko nodded. Well, I can understand why you would pull him from a toxic environment, and I hope we can reach a resolution that both parties can agree to. Inko blinked, a question coming to mind. Both parties? Why does he say it like the school themselves aren't involved? What is the government willing to offer in compensation? Mara pulled out a contract and pointed towards a number. This is how much we're offering if you drop the lawsuit and let us punish the staff in your place. Inko thought hard, voicing her question to Mara before grabbing the sheet. How are the staff going to be punished? I was hoping she wouldn't ask that. Now it's going to be a lot harder to convince her. Mara quietly cursed to himself. Well, their pays will be docked, and they will undergo retraining as educators, but ultimately, after 6 months, they'll likely return to teaching. In a loud crunch, Inko crushed the coffee cup in her hand, spilling some on the floor. She didn't even look guilty, as her face filled with anger. The HPSC is willing to pardon those scum and thinks that's acceptable. I refuse. Mara grimaced, clearly not liking the way this meeting was going. Before you make up your mind, Midoriya, just look at what we are offering. I have a feeling that you may be hesitant to turn it down. Inko didn't want to, and she knew she would be tempted if she looked, because she had little savings for herself and her son. 5 million yen. That's it. No, I'm not going to. I'm sorry, but no. I don't care if you try to buy me off, but I'm not going to sell my child suffering for money. Mara closed his eyes in what seemed to be thought. I have been authorized to double the amount, but no more. It's all going to be tax-free, of course. Inko froze. The amount would make it easier on their home lives, and if she took about 3 to 4 million and put it in savings, her child could theoretically not have to worry about college, especially if he went to one of the cheaper ones. It's so tempting that she almost said yes. Until a little voice that sounded a lot like her child popped into her head. Mom, why? Don't you love me? Didn't you say you would support me? Inko knew it was her own guilty subconscious saying those things, but it still didn't hurt less to hear them in her son's voice. No. I will not sell his pain to you. Not for 10 million, and not for 10 trillion. This meeting is over. Inko got up, dropped her crushed cup in the garbage bin by the desk, and walked towards the door. I'm sorry about the coffee spill. Mara waved off her concerns. It's quite all right. And it's understandable. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, and you were simply protecting your child. For what it's worth, Midoriya, I believe you did the right thing, and I'm sorry I pushed that on you. I just had a job to do, and even if I don't like it, I didn't have a choice. Inko could hear the genuineness in the government worker's words. I don't blame you, Mara. The greenette closed the door with a small click. Mara reached for his office phone, about to dial a number. I need a nap. I'll take one after this call. Screw whoever finds me. He quietly muttered to himself. He punched in the number before lifting the receiver to his ear. He was quickly connected to the receptionist of the one he was calling. This is Mara, working on the Midoriya case. Please connect me with the commission president. The president lowered his handset after the frustrating call. Are you sure you couldn't have assigned somebody else to deal with the Midoriya lady? His vice president and successor, should something happen to him, called out. No, we're understaffed as it is. I had no choice. She let out a huff. What's the verdict? The president huffed. She refused both offers, so for now we'll allow her to go on with her lawsuits. It'll take more time and paperwork, but we can shuffle the staff around in other schools, and she can feel like she did some good. Whether she knows it or not, those schools are how we identify Quirk's ideal for heroics and the HPSC's Paragon program. Sacrificing the quirkless and weak quirk individuals for the good of the nation is necessary. The woman nodded, seeing the logic behind his words. What if she becomes a problem? The president tinted his hands in thought. Japan was built on an equation, cultivated and refined by our predecessors long past. If she becomes a problem in Japan's equation, then we'll simply have to subtract her from it. Lady Nagant? He shook his head. No, I think she's starting to become disenfranchised. I think it better to wait. After all, there are a few heroes that can get quite overzealous with their pursuit of criminals, you know? Chapter 6. New Friends and New Abilities. I want to teach some people about chakra. Izuku, now 8, looked up to his mother. Inko had put on a bit of weight over the past 2 years, but was still relatively thin. She recalled how Izuku learned and mastered roughly 20 E-rank ninjutsu, 20 D-rank ninjutsu, 15 D-rank jinjutsu, 10 C-rank ninjutsu and jinjutsu respectively, as well as 3 B-rank ninjutsu for massive offensive capabilities. Throw in the 3 taijutsu forms, and various seals. He also knew, and Inko would not be surprised if Izuku could put up a decent fight against some of the stronger pro heroes that existed. Not that she wanted him to do so. But regardless, she was still surprised that an 8-year-old would propose teaching others. Although on second thought, she shouldn't be so shocked. For the past 2 years, it was like he was learning something new every week. Teaching would not only give him valuable experience, but also surround him with valuable companions, students, friends, and maybe even future loves. Of course, Inko still had her reservations. If she were going to allow this, she would sit in on every session. She might be confident in Izuku's strength, but not the trustworthiness of the others. Alright, I'll allow it, but for now no more than a few at a time, and I sit in every session. I don't want something bad to happen. And besides, you're only 8. Izuku motioned to argue, but Inko put her hand up. You agree to these terms, or it's not happening. Izuku sat down in order to think, and Inko patiently waited 10 minutes before her son looked up again. Alright, Mom. I understand. Inko smiled, happy that they found common ground. So who exactly do you want to teach? Izuku gave a sad smile. Quirks have become commonplace, so I want to teach people that are considered uncommon. Maybe I'm being selfish, but I feel like evening the playing field. It took Inko a moment to realize what he was saying, but when she caught on, she smiled. I don't think so. You have my blessing. Izuku ran to grab Inko's laptop. And before she knew it, Izuku had returned with the device already open and signed in. She wanted to argue against Izuku running in the house, but remembered the perfect sense of balance he has. Izuku, almost bouncing off the walls, placed the computer on the coffee table, and sat on the couch pulling up the message board app his mother had installed for him to use. He selected the small Quirkless server that he frequented and began to write out his post while his mother looked over her shoulder. Special event for those who want to get stronger. I'm teaching a 1-hour class next week Wednesday at 5 p.m. The location is the entrance to Mustafa Forest. You don't need to confirm anything as I'll be open for any Quirkless students. Izuku confirmed if Inko was available to chaperone at that time, and she was. But before posting, she modified the post to dress it up. Toshinori Yagi was bored. He had finished his piles of paperwork, but it wasn't as satisfying as it should have been. Yagi didn't know, but about 30-ish Kages were tearing their hair out at the ridiculous speed the man fished said paperwork. It just was not fair. Sarutobi was crying in a corner of heaven, and Hashirama had a murderous look on his face. So, in an act of boredom, he opened the Quirkless server that, while never posting, frequented a lot. He had to keep in touch with his roots somehow. An event? It was posted by a user named SmallKnight2472, likely a massive fan. Oh, a training course for Quirkless people, interesting, but for him kind of useless. That didn't mean he wasn't supportive, it was just, he had a transferable quirk, one that was quite powerful, so it wouldn't really be necessary. Although, his younger self, Prior to meeting Nana probably would have jumped on the chance in order to become a hero if said offer was still available. Besides, his form would stick out like a sore thumb even if he wanted to go. Izuku sat by the small table with water and a few snacks. Nothing too heavy, but if Izuku activated some chakra networks and helps others to train some basic chakra control, he knows they will be hungry. His mother sat off to the side, working on her laptop, with her phone acting as internet. While Izuku waited, he pulled out a few storage scrolls that held the various tools he would use to gauge people. Mentally, he tallied everything sealed. 20 pieces of chakra paper, 10-leaf chakra control exercises, and a few low-level gravity and resist seals. Izuku had learned how to create seals, but was what one would call an advanced sealer. Certainly not a master by any stretch of the imagination, but he could write out most basic seals from memory, and seals he doesn't know he could trace from Orochimaru's collection. Excuse me. He glanced up, a pretty girl looking at him. She had white hair and purple eyes. You wouldn't happen to be the one who set this up, were you? Izuku took a moment to calm himself before replying. I am, and before you introduce yourself, I want to wait a few more minutes for anyone that might be late. She nodded and patiently sat down after grabbing a disposable cup of water. Izuku waited about 10 minutes before calling it. He looked up, and there were 3 people including the girl from earlier. So this is kind of my first time teaching, and well, I just want to say how much it is nice to meet all of you. I mean, no wait, maybe a... Izuku shook his head, dispelling his thought. The oldest of the group snickered at the kid, while Inko gave a small glare at him. How about this, we'll go around and introduce ourselves. Our names, our ages, likes and dislikes, as well as our dreams for the future. I will start off to show you how it's done. My name is Izuku Midoriya, and I'm 8 years old. I like All Might and analyzing quirks as well as training and dislike discrimination and bullying. At one point, I wanted to be a hero, but now I'm not so sure, so until I figure it out, I'll settle for reviving a dead art. Izuku could practically see the question marks looming overhead. Your name is appropriate. Guess I'll go first, the only teen present said. He had dark red hair that was slightly spiked back, pale blue eyes, and a balance between a rounded and sharp face. My name is Roku, and please don't ask me about my last name. I'm 17 years old and I like swords. I've always had a passion for them. My dislikes are quirkless discrimination and bigoted senseis. My dream is to become a fierce master of the blade, but because of my status, any gems willing to take me won't allow me to learn past the intermediate level because I'll hurt myself. Roku used his hands to create air quotations around the word hurt. Izuku could see how frustrated he was. I might not use a sword myself, but I do have some scrolls I can copy. Although that hair color. Izuku had the sneaking suspicion that the teen was descended from the Uzumaki clan. However, hair color does not guarantee that as he himself has dark green hair. So, hair color might not be the best determination of judgment. The second person to volunteer was a slightly taller than him kid. He had a buzzed on the right side haircut with the top draped over the left side, with a slight shine to the hair. Another defining feature was his more rounded eyes, and slightly larger than normal eyebrows. I'm Heavy Lee, and I'm 7 years old. It couldn't be the descendant of Rock Lee here? Maybe, but Izuku filed his suspicions away for later. He needed to pay attention. My likes are hand-to-hand combat, and my dislikes are quirkless discrimination and people underestimating me. I wish to become a 3rd-degree black belt in karate and taekwondo. Okay, his suspicions were getting a lot stronger now. Let's hope that. I'm Yumi Hozuki. God damn it, what are the odds that 3 descendants of shinobi or shinobi clans would be here at the exact same time? And he can't even argue against any similarities. She looks like a female version of Suigetsu from the photos Izuku found. Is God just teasing him right now? In the real world, Alcoruzukaze quickly grabbed some flex tape to fix the big-ass hole in the 4th wall. He could scarcely hear Phil Swift calling out. Now that's a lot of damage. I'm 8 years old like Midoriya. My likes are swimming and swords as well. My dislikes are quirkless discrimination, and the people pretending to be my friend for money. Money? That's right. There were rumors of a wealthy family living in Mustafa named the Hozukis. Not nearly as wealthy as the Yaoyorosis, but still quite well off. Such a background surprised him. As for my dream, well, I'm not quite sure because I haven't thought that far ahead. If Izuku played his cards right, he might be able to get Samahana a new Wilder. Now that they were all introduced, Izuku began the lesson. When one thinks of power, what's the first thing to come to mind? Immediately all 3 answered. Quirks. Izuku smiled and nodded. Well, it is one form of power, but another form is something people have long forgotten. What if I told you that humans were once capable of superhuman feats thousands of years prior to the existence of quirks? Roku scoffed. I'd say you're full of bullshit. Inko let out a soft gasp and reprimanded the redhead's language. Okay then, how about a bet? If I display more than one ability, you have to admit you were wrong. He let out a dark laugh at Izuku's proposal. Doubt it, but sure, go ahead. Izuku went through the hand sealant necessary for enhanced strength before running up to Roku and picking him up. Hey, what? Put me down! Izuku smirked. If you say so. He unceremoniously dropped the teen on his ass. Ow, gently. Roku looked back up, and before he realized Izuku was having off the side of a tree walking up like it was nothing before setting on the underside of a thick branch. What? Quirks only function one way. How is he doing that? Izuku let loose the tiger seal before breathing in. Fire style, fireball jutsu. Izuku chose this jutsu because he didn't want to be reckless with fire in a forest. A small fireball escaped from his mouth, illuminating the slightly darkened area. Once he was done, Izuku looked at the three people gathered and saw shock written on their faces. He went through a few more hand signs before calling out, Wind style, vacuum spheres. He lobbed 3 blats of air, one of which ripped off a branch from a tree about 5 meters away, and the other 2 embed themselves in said tree's trunk. Maybe one more just to get my point across. He focused his chakra on the 3 senses of equilibrium. Genjutsu, nausea. And like following Izuku's command, all 3 fell to the ground holding their heads. He quickly canceled the genjutsu so one of them didn't puke by accident. Now do you see what I am saying? A few moments passed before anger flashed across Roku's eyes. I spent so many years just taking discrimination from everyone, and here you are waving this in front of us. Answer this for me. If humans were capable of this, why did I have to grow up alone and powerless? Peace. Like a flash, Roku's anger dispelled to give way for confusion. It's the ultimate killer. When peace was achieved, slowly but surely people forgot how to use the art of chakra. It was only 2 years ago that I discovered a hidden library of knowledge to use. I'm sorry you had to go through that, but I didn't mean any insult. Izuku jumped off and ran through 5 hand sings before slamming his hand on Roku's stomach. Give a guy some warning next time. He coughed out, feeling a slight amount of pain and surprise. Before he stopped and looked at Izuku, eyes wide. What did you do to me? My body, it feels lighter, almost like a feather. Izuku smiled brightly, happy his lesson plan was going so well. I just unlocked your chakra network. With some training you could in theory be capable of what I can do, and maybe so much more. Roku looked down in thought before kneeling, surprising Izuku and the others. I would be honored to learn under you, sensei. Izuku waved his arms in shock and surprise. Wait, what's this business about being a sensei? I just wanted to teach, not to. Roku cut in. Exactly, that's what senseis do, they teach and we learn. Izuku froze, realizing the position he was in. He relaxed, accepting his fate. Fine, you can call me that, but only when I am teaching. I think I'm too young to be honest. I can agree to that. What's the first lesson, sensei? Izuku beamed, happy that he had convinced the older individual. First, let me unlock the others' chakra networks. Then we'll begin the first lesson. Izuku slammed both hands into Yumi and Heavy before retracting them. While Yumi certainly felt the chakra, for Heavy it was far more subtle. Are you sure you unlock my chakra? I don't quite feel it. Izuku nodded, frowning. First, it's pronounced chakra, and second, I was hoping you wouldn't inherit your ancestors' genetic defect. Heavy's eyes opened in shock. D-defect? Izuku, now grimacing, responded to Heavy's horror-struck tone. Rock Lee was born with narrower than normal chakra veins. It made it impossible for him to use ninjutsu or genjutsu. Tears filled Heavy's eyes as he looked at his hand in contempt. So, you're saying no matter how hard I try, I'll never be strong? I never said that. Shock filled Heavy's face. He looked up to meet Izuku's eyes. Rock Lee was a master of taijutsu or hand-to-hand, and even possessed a powerful ability others couldn't hope to match. The 8 inner gates. It's a technique that puts strain on a body, but with each gate released, one grows only stronger. Heavy looks ecstatic, crying tears of joy. Of course, I'm not going to teach it to you right off the bat, that would be irresponsible. Confusion filled the younger child's face. Let me explain. The 8 inner gates put such strain on a body that one who is woefully unprepared can and likely will die. I wouldn't dare teach it to somebody who hasn't built up the body to take it. In a couple of years, when you're 10 or 11, I'll teach you the first 2 or 3 gates, but no more. Your body needs to mature further. Heavy looked conflicted as he stared down. So until then, what will you have me learn? Izuku pulled out one of his scrolls and unfurled it. Well, I'll be building up your strength and speed first. In here, I possess a resistance seal, something that can make it more difficult to move without putting strain on joints or bones. And if you wish, I can pull out a few taijutsu scrolls for you to learn from. I have one that would be perfect for the descendant of Rock Lee. I have a question. You mentioned descendant, but how do you know that? Izuku turned to Roku, the one who asked that question. The library that I found had journals that referenced various individuals that were unique in certain regards. It's the same how I'm almost certain that Yumi over there is the descendant of Suigetsu Hozuki. Who? Izuku waved off her concerns. I'll explain later who you three are likely descended from. For now, Izuku picked up a leaf and stuck it to his forehead. Hozuki, Roku, you two will be participating in chakra control exercise while I work with Lee here. Find yourself a leaf and place it on your forehead. Push the chakra you can feel outwards and try to get the leaf to stick. Too much and the leaf will go flying, possibly even shredding itself. Too little, and it will simply fall off. That is your first lesson. Roku looked a little exasperated. What's this supposed to do? Izuku motioned for Heavy to take off his shirt and turn around. Control, trust me, you will thank me for this later. Now get to work. Izuku released the items in his stroll, separating a resistance seal from the pile, before placing the paper on Heavy's back. It was designed to come off the parchment when chakra was applied. Say what you will of Orochimaru, but he was a practical thinker. Izuku pushed chakra on the paper before calling out his words. Resistance seal, 1.5 times. Suddenly, Heavy felt the difficulty to move. Careful, right now you're feeling about the resistance between a windstorm and wading through water. As time goes on and it becomes easier to work with, I'll gradually increase the seal, but for now, how about you do some exercises? Aw, damn it! Izuku turned to look at Roku, Inko calling out his foul language. A leaf had blasted off his head, was even showing signs of shredding. He might actually be an Uzumaki descendant. Time's up! Izuku took a lot around. Yumi had succeeded in her objective, but Roku looked frustrated. And Heavy finally got used to the resistance, so next week it's being up to 1.75 times. But for now, Izuku was proud. He pulled out 2 pieces of blank paper. Hozuki, Roku, take one of these papers and push your chakra though. I'll explain what they are afterwards. They followed Izuku's directing and pumped some chakra in to get back 2 pieces of wet paper. Interesting. What you just did was test for an elemental affinity, and surprisingly you both passed as water types. I myself, however. Izuku pulled out his own paper, it cutting in half, before igniting. Have wind as my primary and fire as secondary. Now the 5 elements balance each other out. Fire is strong against wind, wind is strong against lightning, lightning is strong against earth, earth is strong against water, and water is strong against fire. It gets a bit more complicated, but that's the gist of it. Next week I'll have a few E-level ninjutsu scrolls ready for you. Roku, if you have a blade bring it, I'll bring out a couple of kenjutsu scrolls for you. Lee, I'll teach you some taijutsu. As for you Hozuki, but for now you will have to wait, but if you impress me enough, I'll bring out a special gift for you. Yumi pouted before brightening up. Oh, and I almost forgot, this is meant to be secret, so don't tell anyone unless you want me to stop. And finally, would next week Wednesday be ideal at the same time? 3 nods all around. Yumi, it's time to go. Izuku glanced at the woman with light blonde hair. She was dressed in a formal business suit and seemed to be busy talking on her phone. Yumi whispered something in Izuku's ear. Thank you, sensei. And before he knew it, a teen busy on her phone came up to get Heavy. Come on, your father wants you home in 15 minutes. Heavy ran to catch up. Izuku watched as those two left. Can I ask you something? Izuku turned to look up at Roku. Are you okay? Roku flinched. Did your parents abandon you? Inko at this point stopped typing and was listening in. Not in the sense you might think. They didn't like that I was quirkless, but I wasn't exactly kicked out on the streets. It's just that ever since I was 4, they ignored me and pretended I didn't exist. Sure, they gave me a roof over my head, a bed to sleep in, food to eat, and a small amount of clothes, but for the most part, it was likely I was a reluctant stranger in their house. When I turned 16, they gave me a small wad of cash and asked for me to leave. To be honest, I don't want their family name, so I got it legally removed until I find a suitable replacement. Would you like to eat dinner with us? Inko called out, closing her laptop after a moment. We have more than enough room, and I can tell you haven't had a real home-cooked meal in forever. Roku shook his head. No, thank you, A slight aura of intensity loomed over Inko. Please, I insist. Roku nervously swallowed, visibly sweating. On second thought, that sounds wonderful. The aura disappeared as Inko stood up beaming. Great. Izuku, help me with the small table, please. Yes, Mom. Chapter 7. Summons and Bloodline. Izuku flashed through all 7 hand signs slowly. The jutsu he was preforming was a C-rank water-style ninjutsu, not exactly his affinity, but he did promise Yumi that if she finished her exercises, he would teach her a C-rank jutsu for her affinity. And despite the chakra drain he was about to experience, he still took pride in his promises and teaching. Water-style, water trumpet. Izuku placed his hands in a closed fist before water gushed from his mouth, striking down a target 5 meters away. Yumi looked in awe as Izuku panted form the drain he felt. Had he been in a more humid environment, he might have been able to reduce the amount of chakra. Once he caught his breath, she began to use the correct hand seals for the jutsu. No, dragon comes before tiger. Before long, Yumi had memorized the sequence, going through the hand motions to get accustomed, and pulled on her chakra. Water style, water trumpet. Yumi called out before mimicking Izuku's hand motions. What came out wasn't super impressive, but was a fabulous first try, landing about 3 meters away. Izuku grumbled to himself about lucky first tries and matching affinities, before his face brightened, and he called the other two from their respective exercises. Roku ended the glow of his blade, sheathing the chakra conductive sword for later use, and Heavy reapplied his weights to his body, after practicing katas against a tree. Both approached Izuku as Yumi waited expectantly. It's been 2 months, and I can't explain how happy I am with how fast you are all growing in strength. However, the 3 students tensed at their sensei's tone. I'm not going to be present for the next 2 weeks to a month. While Heavy and Yumi bombarded him with questions, Roku looked at Izuku in thought before nodding. Izuku flashed some of his chakra to get the two to settle down. Just because I'm leaving doesn't mean I'm leaving you with nothing. Izuku unsealed 3 scrolls with each of his students' names on them. Each of these scrolls have 4 techniques suited to your taste and combat preferences. I spent a lot of nights translating the original scrolls for you guys. The subtle meaning was practically beating them over the heads, and they thanked him for his lost nights. Izuku handed them out. There is also a bonus jutsu for each of you, but only if you learn and master the other techniques to an acceptable degree. For Roku, a variable jutsu designed to sharpen any metal depending on the amount of chakra it uses. While it does not match your affinity, it will be easy to learn as the lowest level is considered D rank. I've also included the water walking technique, as well as a D rank water style ninjutsu to help your combat style. The final jutsu is a taijutsu meant to go in hand with sword play. As for the bonus jutsu, well, you will simply have to finish the first 4 before moving on. Heavy, I have included an internal ninjutsu used to improve speed. You cannot use ninjutsu like most can, but that does not stop you from enhancing your own body. I have also included a new form of taijutsu, useful for smaller, faster bodies. Until you fully grow, I would recommend this to be your go-to in most combat situations. The third, like Roku, is walker walking, so you can fight on land or sea. As for the fourth, well, I've read up about my guy and his use of nunchucks. Heavy got excited. Whoa, hold on, these are made of a light, durable type of wood. They don't have the same impact force normal metal ones have. I want you to learn and memorize how to fight with these before I can consider giving you metal ones. Heavy's face fell, but accepted the scroll anyway. Yumi, the 4th technique is something you are going to have to wait for until I return because, without supervision, you could end up killing yourself. Yumi tried to stammer something out, but Izuku shook his head. I'm not joking. Those who have attempted this previously have died simply because they were either too weak or too unfavorable. You could practically see the question mark forming over her head, but she did not question it. I've included water walking, which I recommend you do first, 2 C-rank ninjutsu, water style, water whip, and water style, water bullet, and if you finish and master the rest, a borderline B-rank ninjutsu water style, water slicer, but only after you built your reserve some more. I'd rather you not pass out from going plus ultra. I understand the confusion on the sudden leave, but I have the utmost faith in you. Please take it easy though, I don't want any of you to get into accidents when I'm gone. I would never forgive myself. The others took a moment to look at Izuku's 8-year-old face. For somebody so young, he was surprisingly smart and mature. They nodded, smiles on their respective faces, as they got their individual bags and left the training ground. As soon as they were out of range, Izuku fell over backwards, exhausted. Why is teaching so hard? Izuku grumbled to himself about all the hardships of doing this. He was a kid, for crying out loud. He should have wanted to play with toys and make new friends. Well, he did accomplish the latter, but in a more roundabout way. However, he had to focus on the here and now. The problem is, he didn't tell his mother. I'm home, Mom! Izuku called out as he entered the kitchen. Inko jumped at his voice. Izuku, don't startle me when you enter. I didn't even hear the door. Sorry, Mom. Izuku hugged his mother as he got to work on that day's homework from his online-based home school. Ever since Izuku stopped going to public school, his body stopped hurting all the time from unwanted and unwarranted attacks. Not only was his body recovering, but his mental wellness had improved to the point he no longer stuttered when cornered by Katsuki on the rare occasion that they run into each other. Inko placed a plate of food by Izuku as the boy filled out mathematical equations. The math that he was doing was a year advance, so it was not a surprise to find that his math work were often tampered with in public school, because Kami forbid the Quirkless kids is smarter than the star student. And before long, Izuku was finished and pulled out an empty sealing scroll. I need to learn how to make these. Orochimaru might have had lots, but sooner or later I am going to run out. He walked to his room and collected some jutsu scrolls he had been working on before sealing them into the scroll. Next on his list was non-perishables. He wanted food that could last a few years undisturbed. The way sealing scrolls worked was by compressing space, but to do that, time had to be expanded. This scroll was considered a medium-sized scroll, meaning that space and time were compressed and stretched by a factor of 5. So, if he kept a piece of food in there for 1 month, it would have been 5 months old. What's with the scroll, Izuku? He froze at his mother's questioning. He had just finished packing everything, including a few sets of clothes. He turned to look and noted the dark look on her face, as she clearly put together Izuku was about to do something against her wishes. Sorry, Mom, Izuku weakly said before biting his thumb, going through some hand seals, and yelling. Summoning Jutsu! Izuku disappeared in white smoke. Inko merely blinked before sighing. He is so grounded when he gets back. As Izuku appeared in white smoke, he lamented to himself. I am so grounded when I get back. He breathed in the very clean air and looked around. He appeared to be in a darkened forest, trees higher than he could feasibly climb. Various flora and fauna seen as far as the eye can see. Izuku's hair stood on end as he turned around. A pair of yellow slitted eyes came from below a bush before they moved towards him. A furred gray paw stepped forward as the creature revealed itself to be a wolf. Who dares to enter the domain of the wolf clan? Izuku nervously swallowed. I, Izuku Midoriya, do, Great Wolf. I come seeking an ally to become my summoning. The wolf looked at the 8-year-old before barking out a laugh. You? You aren't even what you humans consider to be an adult. Don't make jokes in poor taste. Izuku's eyes sharpened as his form gained a more solid stance. The wolf stopped laughing as he looked at Izuku once more. You are serious? Very well, but the final decision does not come from me, but rather the patriarch of the clan pack. Follow me, Izuku Midoriya. Well, I guess I found what I was looking for. Izuku thought to himself as he followed the slow pace of the gray wolf. It was only a few short minutes before Izuku arrived at a cave. As he entered, he failed to notice a pair of black eyes looking at his back. A wolf as big as a house sat in the center of the large cave. How they got in and out was anyone's question, but Izuku didn't care at the moment. The gray wolf happened to have a claw scar over his right eye which was perpetually closed. The large wolf looked with his singular left eye upon Izuku and the gray wolf that led him there. Why have you brought this child here, my son? The smaller wolf bowed his head to the apparent leader. This child appeared in a cloud of smoke, like the legends of shinobi once did. He claims to have come seeking an ally to act as his summon. The various wolves looked at Izuku in surprise and shock, except for the wolf boss, who simply took a more calculated look at Izuku. Has humanity regained the lost knowledge of Chakra, young one? Izuku shook his head. Have you heard of the snake Sannin Orochimaru? The elder wolf nodded his head. He is considered one of the most famous shinobi of times long gone. Am I to presume that he has something to do with this? Izuku lowered his head in confirmation. Yes, Orochimaru eventually reached his end goal of immortality, but after thousands of years, grew weary and tried of this world. Before he left for the Pure Land, he had 2 bunkers on opposite sides of the elemental nations, which eventually, through seismic activity, warped into the country I live in today. It was only 2 years ago that I found one of his old bases. The other's location is unknown to me. He hoped that explanation would satisfy. The wolf boss's left eye lingered on Izuku before huffing in confirmation. You have appeared, the first of a potential many. And you have come with a request, seeking allies. You shall be tested. Izuku nodded, but was wary. Some animal clans kill people who failed their tests. The wolf boss seemed to sense his fear despite the calm demeanor the 8-year-old had. Do not fear, child. Many generations ago, my ancestor set up this trial. Out of 10 prospects, only 6 passed the test. However, none who failed were punished or killed. They were sent back to their homes with all their belongings and bodies intact. That gave Izuku a sigh of relief. I'm ready. The boss let out a huff of laughter. Good child, for 1 week, you will hunt and live with wolves, understand us, and grow to respect us. Do not worry, as you may cook whatever meat you catch. You will be allowed to work with the wolf pups, my grandchildren. Please hand over any items that might assist you in the upcoming week. Izuku contemplated giving his sealing scroll away, but knew he had to remain in good faith. He also began to strip himself of any weapons. Hold on, you may keep a single kunai knife, if only to make up for your lack of claws and fangs. Do not lose it, as you will not be allowed another. Izuku nodded before handing over everything except a single kunai in his hand. We will begin the test moment dash. Hold on. Izuku and the wolves turned to the entryway of the cave. There, sitting on the ground with anger visible in its eyes, was a red-furred rabbit. We of the rabbit clan share this forest with you wolves. How do we know you simply haven't stolen our prospective summoner? The wolf Izuku first met took a step forward while growling. How dare you, rabbit? He appeared within our territory, not yours. You have no claim. As much as Izuku wished it didn't devolve into a full-blown argument, it only took another exchange to get there. Tired of standing, Izuku sat down and decided to give the wolves and the rabbit a minute before he interjected. He decided to yell at them in Japanese, to ease them into a more modern language. Enough! They all paused and looked at Izuku. Okay, aside from the rabbits and wolves, is there any other clan that shares this forest? The rabbit and the wolves all shook their respective heads. Then perhaps the simplest solution is to share me like you share the forest. The rabbit and wolves looked affronted except for the wolf boss, who looked thoughtful. One of the wolves stepped forward. Out of the question, the rabbit and wolf clans have been at odds since we both arrived at this forest. It was only with the passing of the previous wolf boss that we have entered a treaty of neutrality. One mostly a sprit, as we have minor skirmishes that, thankfully, don't result in fatalities. The red rabbit rolled its eyes. As much as I hate it, I agree with the inbred mutt over there. There is no way that we of the rabbit clan will work with the wolves. It looked like a full-on fight was about to break out, as some wolves' chakra began to emit, and smoke poured from the rabbit's nostrils. But before they could fight, a feeling of death washed over them all. Izuku, never experiencing this, and therefore did not have immunity to it, could only see his own demise alongside the others. Is this killer intent? He thought as he turned and looked at the wolf boss, before the Lupin let off the aura and spoke calmly. Return to your boss, Red Hair, and discuss the possibility of sharing this young man. The red-furred rabbit, not looking a gift horse in the mouth, hopped off to get away from the wolf boss. You cannot be serious, uncle. We have been at odds with the rabbits many millennia ago. To even do this is... A female wolf spoke to her apparent uncle. I am the wolf boss, niece, and have been since I bested my own father in combat. Do not presume to make my decisions for me. And my decision is final. We have the beginning of the shinobi's return, right here. To fight over it to put that at risk. The wolf patriarch looked at Izuku, who was drawing something in the dirt with his kunai, before noting the silence and looking up. I apologize for that. The wolf that accompanied Izuku to the cave whispered something in his father's ear. Izuku, now I believe we were about to perform the test to see if you may summon those of our clan. Izuku nodded at the wolf boss. Well, I have already noted everything. Understand this, should you feel the need to fail the test, you may speak to any of the adult wolves about it. Now I am certain you have noted our lack of names. Izuku nodded once more. Should you pass the test, as our new summoner, you shall grant the name we shall use under your service. Any other details to mention are strictly for those who do become our summoner. Triplets? 3 tiny wolves came forward. They all yipped at him in excitement. Hi there, Izuku. My brother and sister are all excited to meet and work with you. Izuku bent down and looked at the squeaky-voiced wolf. Do you mind if I scratch you? The pup looked at him. Go right ahead. In fact, there's this specific spot on my back I haven't been able to take care of. I think a bug bit me there. Izuku nodded as he followed the trio out, likely to begin the day. Once he was gone, the wolf boss peered his left eye at the cave entrance. Return already, Red Hair? What say your boss? The red rabbit glared at the wolf boss. She is willing to negotiate, but only if you come to the neutral ground between our 2 territories. The wolf boss nodded before getting up, walking towards another cave entrance. Day 1. Izuku and the triplets all began the day with some exercise. Afterwards, using a jutsu, Izuku hunted with the pups a breakfast of deer. It took them over an hour to find and entrap a small one to have. But once close enough, Izuku made use of his kunai, sinking in the deer's head. He dragged the deer back while the pups tried to help but were too small to actually make a noticeable difference. He cut off a large chunk of the deer to be cooked over a fire, lit by a deer katan, leaving the rest for the wolf trio. He then took a nap, the pups soon joining him after playing with each other. Then, once he woke up, he began to practice what he could from memory. The pups noted what he was doing and became enamored with his jutsu. They even let him do a decent-sized lake, so he could practice the 2-water-style jutsu he knew, and work on his fire style some more without risk of burning down the forest. They finished off the day with a dinner of the same deer they caught earlier. Day 2. Izuku started the day with chakra control exercises. Leaves across his body while water walking. Once an hour had passed. He used a spear he crafted to go spear fishing. He ended up catching 7 fish. 1 for himself, and the other 6 to have for lunch, as they likely finished the deer for a smaller breakfast. He stuck the 7 fish on long sticks before returning to the fire pit used to cook the deer the day before. Personally, he wasn't a big fan of fish, but he needed a varied diet of food, so his body would properly grow. The wolves were ecstatic to eat fish, as the water dwellers were always too fast to catch normally. He had the fish he was going to eat thoroughly cooked, while he had the fish the pups were going to eat, what one would call medium rare. The pups ate as did Izuku, and when done, he went to gather some edible plants. The female triplet accompanied him, and helped identify berries that were not poisonous to her knowledge. Worst case, he would have a bad stomachache later, but he collected a good shirt full for dinner. He spent the rest of the day teaching the wolf pups how to speak a little bit of Japanese, citing that if he had them as his summons, it would likely be easier for anyone who met them to directly communicate, rather than use Izuku as a translation buffer. Day 3. Izuku and the triplets spent the morning hunting elk, a considerably larger animal than deer. It took nearly twice as long, and Izuku's gut was beginning to knot in on itself before they could enclose the animal and Izuku could kill it with a kunai to the throat. They now had food that would last for 3 to 4 days, so they gorged themselves on a heavy helping of food. Izuku even offered some to the wolf boss, as appreciation for letting him take the test. Izuku and the pups spent most of the day sleeping the heavy meal away. Day 4. The fourth day consisted of Izuku teaching the wolf pups how to unlock chakra and using it for water waking. It was slow going, but after a handful of hours, the wolf pups were able to keep themselves from sinking below the water for about 3 minutes before they became too tired. And while they rested, Izuku collected more berries, ate a decent lunch, and practiced his water style. After dinner, he also taught the wolf pups a bit more of his native tongue. It, like water walking, was slow going, but was making progress. Day 5. Day 5 was largely uneventful, following the same pattern as Day 4, only a bit more productive. Aside from that, Izuku rinsed out and dried his clothes on some purified water. Still a pretty good day in Izuku's book. It was the next day that problems arose. Day 6. Izuku was running as fast as he could. Right behind him, a massive bear. Normally he would attack the bear, but its thick hide made it all but immune to futon, and the forest was dense enough that if he let off a strong katon in the vicinity, he would likely burn the place down. Throw in the fact that he was 99% certain the bear could climb trees, that he couldn't risk it. And he can't even tree hop to escape. The pups were trying to keep up with Izuku and the bear, but being as young as they are makes it very hard. Unfortunately for Izuku, he might have run into a dead end, a small cave he tried to duck in. In retrospect, he should have gone another way, but he was 8, thinking ahead wasn't his strongest trait. He turned around, pulling out his kunai to attack the bear. "If I'm going down, you're going to go down with me!" He pulsed his chakra in an attempt to scare the bear away, but the creature, having living in chakra-dense forest, shrugged it off. It raised its clawed paw and swung down, and all Izuku could do was look as his life seemingly was about to end. And then, everything slowed down. It was like the bear was moving in slow motion, and Izuku was able to see every detail on the bear's body. However, whatever it was could wait. He needed to get rid of the bear, and flash through 30 hand seals for his only A-rank ninjutsu. He didn't tell his mother that he had such a jutsu in his arsenal, but he did, simply for emergencies like this. He used as little chakra as possible, while bringing his hand, still in a seal, to his mouth. Fire style, compressed flame cannon. With the jutsu cast, a small white stream of flames hit the bear faster than it knew what was going on, and scorched its face incredibly fast. He only was able to keep the jutsu up for 5 seconds, but that was enough. The bear fell dead, its face charred and smoking. "Izuku!" The wolf trio cried out as they finally arrived, out of breath. "Are you all right?" One of the wolves asked him. The other two were busy staring at him. "Yeah." "Oh good, I thought you were going to die." "What is?" Izuku looked confused. What? Why are your eyes red? And glowy?" It was then Izuku noted the slight drain of chakra behind his eyes. It couldn't be. "We're going to the lake." Out of that sentence, the pups only understood going and lake, but it was enough, and they followed Izuku to the lake, a walk lasting about half an hour. Once arrived, Izuku peered into the crystal clear water, a pair of bright red eyes, with a single comma orbiting the pupil in each, where his green eyes are meant to be. He could only think one thing. Sharingan. Chapter 8. Wolves, Rabbits, and Returns. Izuku deactivated his Sharingan. No point in wasting chakra that he didn't have. The wolf triplets were unaware of what exactly Izuku had now, likely due to their youth, but Izuku didn't care. It was something to deal with when he was safe and sound, not in a forest trying to survive his test. "Let's go get some food, then take a nap. After the near death, I feel like doing so." And that distracted them enough that they stopped caring about the pretty red eyes. Honestly, Izuku needed to remember that they had the attention span of 3-year-olds. While they began to hunt, Izuku was thinking to himself, "Is it possible? No, can't be. Maybe I'm just a few generations descended from the anomaly. Yeah, that's it." He really didn't want to think of worst-case scenario. Soon enough he and the wolves had caught a small deer, likely in its younger years. Well, circle of life. He ate far more than he should have, and fell asleep. When he woke up, he felt too tired to move, so the wolf trio stayed inside to keep him company. Good timing too, as it looked like some light rain was going to come in. The rain had been appearing randomly across day and night over his week-long test. Annoying as sometimes it would happen during training, but you can't control the weather. At least, Izuku couldn't yet. Something to try out for another time. He returned to sleep, letting the 7th day pass him by, and with that his task with the wolf clan was over. "You have succeeded, I see. Congratulations on passing our test." The wolf boss spoke, abruptly waking up Izuku. The child sat up with haste and looked at the entrance. which the boss wolf had his head poked in. Wake the triplets and return to my cave to discuss terms. Izuku, not wanting to anger the boss wolf with delaying, shook the triplets awake. They groggily got up and yawned. What's going on? One of them asked. The test is over, and the wolf boss has asked for us to come to his cave. All the wolf pups jumped up, yipping with excitement. Yay, you get to stay, you get to stay. They ran around their new summoner with very high spirits. Izuku chose to let them burn off some energy as they went to the boss cave. And, personally, he was also excited. As they entered the cave, Izuku took note of the red-furred hare standing by the entranceway. It was hard to tell based on facial expressions, but it seemed very annoyed to be here. Regardless, he needed to finish with the wolf boss and sign the contract. He then kneeled towards the wolf boss. It is good to see you have succeeded in your test, Izuku-sama. I welcome you as our new summoner, the wolf boss said, bowing his head to the young shinobi. Izuku nodded his head in response. I ask that you now grant me a name to prove your alliance to our clan. You need not name us all, as only I will do, but you may choose to do so at a later date with the others. Izuku paused, thinking of a name. He couldn't screw this up, otherwise the others might eat him. Heh. Okami means wolf, so that would be far too basic. Maybe something along the lines of his look? Grey wolf, great grey wolf, boss of grey wolves, maybe first of the wolves? Wait, that's it. Izuku smiled as he looked up at the boss wolf. Ichiro, the wolf boss. The wolf clan all looked at Izuku for a moment as the boss contemplated the new name. Yes, that name will be most suitable for me, the wolf boss said, now Ichiro, after a moment of contemplation. The clan all responded in kind with cheers and howls, signifying a new summoner. Of course, it wasn't something that lasted that long as a voice cut through the celebration. All right, can we hurry it up now? I need to get him to Milady, the red-furred rabbit called out. Some of the wolves began to growl at the rabbit. How dare you interrupt our celebration? I ought to dash. Ichiro cut in. Of course, that was the agreement. Ichiro turned to Izuku. Izuku-sama, whenever you have the time, summon the wolf triplets. They will act as your primary summons, like how the many generations ago Manda was Orochimaru's. And don't forget to give them some names when you can. Izuku nodded. Of course. Present him with the summoning scroll. A lone wolf came forward. A large scroll held by their tail, before said wolf placed it on the ground, and unrolled the scroll with its snout. Izuku took in the scroll looking upon the number of summoners. It wasn't as many as he expected, but there was one prominent one that stood out. Why does this one have a silver name rather than black? Ichiro leaned forward to look at the scroll. Oh, I believe that means someone had signed the Lunar Wolf contract. Izuku blinked in confusion. We are not the only wolf clan to exist. There are a total of 10, with 9 of them all sharing the same distinction and prestige. However, the Lunar Wolves can be seen as the strongest and most feared of the wolf clans. If someone were to pass their test and sign their contract, they can call upon any of the 10 wolf clans. However, if someone signed for the Lunar Wolves, it is very unlikely any of the lesser clans would be summoned. Ichiro then noticed something that made his eye widen slightly. Something Izuku did not. Alright, so I write my name in blood and use CHAKRA to burn my fingerprints in, right? Ichiro nodded. Does the language matter? A shake of the head confirmed that it did not. Izuku bit off a tip of his right thumb before writing his name in Japanese, afterwards moving his hand under his name and burning his fingerprints onto the contract. Congratulations. A cough rang out from the entranceway. I believe it would be prudent if you go with young Kazuya over there. Don't tell him my name without my permission, you stupid wolf. Smoke escaped the nostrils of the red rabbit, Kazuya. Some of the wolves began to growl. Let him take his things first, then he will be with you. Izuku took that as his time to gather his sealing scrolls from the corner of the cave, before bowing to the wolf boss. He then turned and began to follow the red hare, Kazuya. When the new summoner was out of earshot, Ichiro turned to his daughter. I want you to begin to investigate the silver name on the scroll. What? Why? Is something off? Yes, the individual known as Een, his name has active chakra flowing through it. The wolves in the cave stiffed in shock. But then, that would mean, Ichiro nodded. Yes, he is still alive. How could anyone from so long ago still be alive? It should be impossible. You forget that a mini shinobi managed to acquire immortality in some sense of the word. Sasori of the Red Sand turned himself into a puppet. Kakazu of Taki acquired hearts. Haiden of the Jashinists was gifted immortality from that demonic god Jashin, and even Orochimaru achieved it in the end. I don't know who Een is, but for him to acquire immortality makes him dangerous, especially considering he let the shinobi world die and did nothing. Try and locate any trail of him in the world if you can, daughter. The female wolf bowed its head and left the cave for the gateway to the human world. Izuku began to follow Kazuya after collecting his belongings from the wolves. They headed towards the rabbit burrow. So what is the rabbit clan like? Stronger than the wolves? Pride and a touch of arrogance was present in Kazuya's voice. It reminded Izuku of Katsuki. He wisely chose not to argue that point. Izuku decided to remain quiet until he arrived at the rabbit den, or burrow as it was called, which was a long walk as the rabbits had made their home as far from the wolf's cave as possible while still being in the bounds of the forest. But despite the exhaustion Izuku felt from over the week, he arrived at the burrow in a timely fashion. Izuku was mildly surprised when what he assumed to be, rabbit boss, as large as Ichiro and with pure white fur, was outside and waiting for him. "So you are Izuku?" He nodded. "I am the rabbit boss, Kagaya. It is a pleasure to meet you." The white rabbit bowed its head, with the other rabbits, all sporting a variety of colors, following suit. "We of the rabbit clan share the forest with the wolf clan, and despite a few incidents, we have peacefully coexisted with them. In order to continue our coexistence, the wolf boss and I have reached an agreement to share you as a dual summoner. Do you have any questions about the agreement before I proceed with the test?" "I do have a question, but it isn't relevant to the test. My second question is, should I fail your test, what will be my punishment?" The white rabbit turned its head to the side. "In times of past, the rabbit clan has been seen as weak, incapable of being strong. Because of that fixed mentality, we would kill those who fail the test to prove our strength." Izuku tensed his body. "However, you passed the Grey Wolf Summon test, and are the newest summoner of them. You represent new summoning contracts for other clans and chakra users. Should we kill you as we once did in the past for others, we would only invite war from all other clans and the Grey Wolves, and we would go extinct as a consequence." "Why would other summoning clans attack you for killing me? I can understand the wolves, but the others?" A few loose-lipped individuals in the wolf and rabbit clans admitted that somebody who could use chakra has come to sign our contracts. It was hard to notice, but a couple of rabbits seemed to look away at that statement. "As I've said before, you represent a new generation of chakra users, and many clans are excited about that prospect. To kill you would only stop any future students you might have from learning about chakra, and in turn prevent summoning clans from returning to their original duties. I should probably avoid mentioning that I already have 3 students, 2 of which can use chakra externally. Otherwise, the rabbits might resume the death penalty, regardless of if they went to war with the wolves." Izuku might be a child still, but he has self-preservation instincts like all naturally born humans. "I am ready, Rabbit Boss Kagaya." The white rabbit nodded its large head. Its aura of such then seemed to turn downright malicious. "Your test is simple. Fight, fire style, fire hair." At the last moment, Izuku managed to duck under a flaming rabbit attack. He turned and looked behind him, where smoke could be seen coming out of Kazuya's mouth. "I see, so we are fighting. Wind style, blade cutter." Izuku waved his right arm, sending an invisible blade towards the red rabbit, who jumped out of the way. "Fire style, flame kick." Izuku jumped back from the kick before slamming his left hand on the ground. "Earth style, thin wall." Izuku yelled in Japanese. If Kazuya didn't understand the language, then he couldn't predict Izuku's next move. Unsurprisingly, Kazuya couldn't change his trajectory last second and hit the wall, cracking it. The rabbit bounced off the wall and shook its head. "Using a language I don't understand to catch me off guard. Sneaky, but very shinobi-like. Fire style, flamethrower." A stream of fire came forth from Kazuya's mouth. "Wind style, air kick." This jutsu was one developed by Orochimaru, and was labeled B rank for its difficulty. It formed compressed air bubbles under the feet, allowing for quicker and farther jumps. It wasn't flying, but it could move you mid-air without needing to hit the ground first. Izuku jumped away from the breath of fire that was following him. He jumped right behind Kazuya. "Water style, water trumpet." With that move, Izuku knocked out a quarter of his remaining reserves, and only managed to get Kazuya wet. Kazuya stopped his fire before shaking his wet body to get rid of most of the water. "Fire style, flame body." Izuku gulped as the rabbit's body seemed to catch on fire. Now might be a good time to use my new eyes. He needed to evade all of Kazuya's now very dangerous moves. Without a second thought, Izuku activated his single Tomo Sharingan. Izuku could hear Kagaya mutter about the Sharingan, likely knowing what it was. Suddenly, without warning, Kazuya was right in front of Izuku's face, who then dived out of the way of the kick. While his single Tomo couldn't predict movement, his years of analyzing people combined with the attention to detail that the Sharingan provides allowed him to react fast enough to avoid the obviously painful kick. "Wind style, blade cutter." Hopefully, Izuku could use Kazuya's own flames against him. The wind attack hit the rabbit, and the fire seemed to flare up momentarily before Kazuya jumped at Izuku again. The child jumped back before hopping onto a lower-level tree branch. He began to jump towards the lake Izuku had been at previously. "I'm going to need a source of water if I want to use any more water style." Kazuya began to follow him on the ground, likely to avoid having any of the trees alight. Izuku jumped down from his tree and skid backwards on top of the lake. "Water style, water blast." A large pool of water rose from the lake and shot at Kazuya. The rabbit, stunned by the sudden attack as he landed, barely jumped away. Izuku, however, was expecting that. Water style, water whip! He prayed that this worked. He was very nearly out of chakra. The snake of water surrounded Kazuya's body, water sizzling from the fire, before throwing the rabbit in the lake. It happened so fast that Kazuya didn't even have time to process the whip. The water bubbled for a minute before a red rabbit rose to the top of the lake, thoroughly soaked and seemingly passed out. Izuku then grabbed a scroll from his belt and threw a net he had stored onto Kazuya's seemingly unconscious body. Water whip was a jutsu that was designed to pull somebody into a body of water, and depending on the intention, either bind them, make them pass out from lack of oxygen, or outright kill them from strangulation. The longer the jutsu was used, the more chakra it sapped. And considering how exhausted Izuku was, even a single fireball would probably make him pass out from chakra exhaustion. He quickly shut off his Sharingan, pleased that helped with the fight. They couldn't copy any of Kazuya's jutsu, simply because no hand seals were used, but at least he got experience using them in combat. And in this case, it wasn't a fight to the death like what could have once been, and Izuku's confidence in his eyes for such a match was non-existent. Izuku threw a hooked rope, catching the net on one of its corners. He began to walk across the water to the shoreline, where he then pulled the net further until it was grasped in his hand. He peered into the net to observe the rabbit. Kazuya was still breathing at least, but he was out cold. As a fire-style user, Kazuya must not be accustomed to holding his breath underwater for prolonged periods. The green-haired child shook his head before making his way slowly to where the burrow was. He took a slow trek, as he needed time to catch his breath. He pulled out of the scrolls he had and summoned a granola bar and a chakra pill. These pills were designed to refill your reserves by a third, but it was inadvisable to use them in combat. The simple reason was that if he took more than 2 at a time, he would damage his own chakra network, and the fact that there was a limited supply of them. Orochimaru had not included a full recipe, only a list of ingredients, some of which only existed in cold storage. And without the right equipment, creating more would be out of the question. He first chomped down on the pill, feeling his reserves return, before moving to the granola bar to wash out the bad taste of the pill. The chakra pill and blood replenisher pill were both considered some of the nasty tasting things possible. At least old school rations didn't exist, and humanity has moved to better tasting rations. He emerged from behind a large tree, with an unconscious and trapped rabbit in hand. He looked at the gathered rabbits, and a wolf off to the side curiously, likely to make sure Izuku was still alive. If the rabbits and wolves went to war, it might end up destroying both clans and the forest. He gently put the net on the ground, letting Kazuya free. The rabbit was still knocked out, so Izuku approached the boss, Kaguya. 15 minutes later, and you have bested Kazuya, the best fire user of the rabbit clan. Impressive. The boss couldn't smile, but Izuku got that general feeling from it. I'm certain that he underestimated me and went easy as a result. The pure white rabbit nodded her head. At first, but after he used flame body, it was clear he wasn't holding back. Somebody wake him. A pale yellow and white rabbit jumped forward and landed in front of Kazuya. Static electricity seemed to move across the rabbit's body before it placed its nose in Kazuya's side. With a sudden jolt, Kazuya woke up yelping. I'm up. The red hair looked around to find all eyes on him. So, about the test. You have a decade of experience, and yet you got your own ass handed to you who only has what? 3 years of training? The rabbit boss seemed to get a bit cruder with her anger. 2.5 if you include language studies. Izuku chimed in. He wanted to feel bad, but the rabbit was trying to kill him, or get as close as he could. The large boss narrowed her eyes. 2 years. Clearly you have been slaking off, Kaguya said, disappointment present in her voice. Kazuya shivered from her tone. You touted yourself as the strongest of the newest generation, and yet you have been felled by your own arrogance. After you beat out all of your competition within said generation, you grew sloppy, stagnant. As a summon, you are expected to have a certain level of skill, a level you do not have. Kazuya's head got lower and lower with every harsh word. You shall be revising things over the next 6 months. I shall personally make sure you improve. Kazuya looked hopeful, before the next set of words ruined that hope. Should you fail to improve to a decent level, you will be expelled from the rabbit clan. Kazuya froze, seemingly unable to process. Izuku took a step back. This was a rather extreme reaction. Was his battle with Kazuya that important? Was there some kind of honor and strength that Kazuya failed to have? However, before he could voice those thoughts, the rabbit boss turned her head towards the human child. Somebody go fetch the summoner's scroll. A sea blue rabbit with a dark blue belly turned 1-8 and hopped into the rabbit den. It emerged not a minute later, with the scroll being dragged along the ground. Is the scroll going to be fine? Izuku asked, concerned for the state of it. Contract scrolls are designed to be rather durable. It would take a lot to actually destroy one properly. I think there was only 2 times in history where a summoning clan scroll actually got destroyed. both of which were the result of high-level S-rank elemental ninjutsu. Dragging it across the ground will not damage it, the rabbit boss supplied. The blue rabbit dragged the scroll across Izuku and unfurled it with its mouth, tugging on the loose knot. It then pushed its head against scroll, causing it to roll open. Izuku immediately took notice of the 4 different names before him. Whichever hand you use for the Wolf Clan, use the other hand for ours. This will prevent the contracts from interfering with each other. It's little known fact, but people can have 2 summons, so long as they are either allies or neutral to each other. I believe the individual known as Sasuke Uchiha could use 2 contracts. I don't know how he managed to get the hawks and snakes to work together, but I do applaud him for it. Izuku nodded his head, when he then bit his left thumb, before writing his name like the wolf contract and burning his fingerprints. The name was slightly more sloppy, as his right hand was the dominant one, but it was still very legible. When Izuku looked up, all the rabbits, save for Kinzuya, who was still processing his shock, had their heads bowed to him. I welcome you as our new summoner and new future for the shinobi arts, Izuku-sama. The boss raised her head. Now, if my research into human lifespans is correct, you are still but a child, and you need to return home soon, is that correct? Izuku blushed and nodded. Mika shall take you back to the point where you reverse summon yourself here and send you back. When you next have chance, try to experiment with summoning various members of my clan, ideally the youngest generation. They need real-world experience. You could also use it as joint training with a wolf summon or 2. Her face seemed to scrunch up at that thought. An orange-colored rabbit bounded forward. Please follow me, Izuku-sama, Mika's soft voice said. Izuku followed after the small female rabbit. He silently followed towards the point of origin. When they arrived a few minutes later, one of the wolves was also present. Male, if the extremity was to be believed. Mika approached the wolf. Izuku-sama has passed and has signed with his left hand. The wolf nodded his head. Both of them looked at Izuku. Do you have everything, Izuku-sama? The wolf asked. Izuku quickly did a head count of all his things before confirming he did. Very well then. Think about your home and where you summoned yourself from. You will be the guide point, while we will be the transportation. Izuku closed his eyes, thought of the entryway where he managed to escape from his mother. She must have been worried sick over the past week. And before he knew it, Izuku vanished in a puff of smoke. When Izuku opened his eyes, there was still some light out the window, but it was dim, and it was most assuredly his home. He couldn't hear his mother at the moment, but she could have been out. Then something nuzzled his leg. He looked down to see Mika stretching herself against him. What are you doing here? Milady wanted me to spend a few days in the human world to see how it had changed from when it was the era of the shinobi. The wolf boss already sent one of his subordinates ahead as well. Do not worry, I am here under my own power and not yours, so there will be no drain on your chakra. Izuku smiled before bending down and picking up Mika to nuzzle her belly. She was warm and seemed to enjoy the feeling, judging from the affectionate sounds. Welcome to my home then. I don't know where my mother is, but I expect her to be back soon. Why don't I show you some TV culture? Izuku carried the rabbit into his living room before tuning on the TV. It switched to a news program that was covering the story of a hero rescued downtown. I think we have some greens. Do you want anything? Mika looked at him before turning her attention to the TV. A few leaves of spinach would be nice if you have it. Izuku nodded before going to the kitchen. He found a bundle in the fridge. He was sure his mother wouldn't mind. He took 4 leaves, grabbed some water in a cup and a bowl, and made his way back to the living room. He put the leaf and bowl on the table next to Mika, who absent-mindedly began to munch. He took a sip of water from his cup. Over the next hour, Mika would ask questions about what heroes and villains were, and when quirks came into existence. They were so engaged with each other that Izuku didn't hear the lock click and the door silently open. In the entryway, Inko heard the TV and could also hear Izuku's voice, albeit in the language he was studying. She quietly placed her bag down and took off her shoes. She silently walked to the living room, hiding behind a corner. She then peered it. It was an odd picture, Izuku talking with an orange rabbit while it ate some spinach, but an amusing one. She pulled out her phone and took a picture, the audible sound catching her son's attention. Mom, hi! He quickly got to his feet and hugged her. Are you going to introduce me? Izuku's eyes widened. Oh, right. Mom, this is Mika of the Rabbit Summon Clan, and Mika, this is my mother Inko Midoriya. It is a pleasure to make your acquaintance, Lady Inko. Izuku hastily translated. The middle-aged woman tried to dissuade Mika from calling her that with Izuku acting as translator, but the rabbit was steadfast. She shook her head in frustration, before her face developed a mask of sorts. Izuku started to look fearful. Izuku, tell me what you have been up to this past week. The tone left not room for error, and he doubted Mika would come to his rescue, so he began to dictate what had happened over his trials. Mika watched, eating a leaf and drinking some water, all the while unable to understand the language, but understanding the drama, and how Izuku was trying not to get into trouble. For the next half hour, he recounted how he met the 2 clans, and how he signed both of their contracts. He also spoke of the time he fought Kanzuya and was nearly mauled by a bear. Inko's frosty mask turned even colder. Once he was done speaking, she stood there for about 5 minutes before her mask dissolved. "Well, tell Mika I welcome her into my home, and if she needs anything she need only get it." Izuku breathed a sigh of relief as he picked up Mika and the last leaf she was eating. He took about 2 steps out of the living room before his mother's voice called out again. "Oh, and Izuku." He turned around and gulped. "Grounded, 2 months with no computer." Chapter 9. Weapons and Emotions. Izuku hummed to himself. He had gotten back into a regular routine of things. Mika had begun to learn the local language, and once Inko had finally calmed down a bit, she cut back the punishment from 2 months to only 2 weeks. She did admit that she overreacted, but Izuku also admits that he completely deserved it for probably shaving of a decade from her life. Once his punishment was over, he sent out a message to Yumi, Roku, and Heavy that training would resume in 2 weeks, and if they have already succeeded in the training skulls he gave them, then they should focus on building up strength, speed, and chakra levels. But afterwards, he got lost in the open internet sea, scouring local sales simply because he was bored. There was nothing interesting on TV, and he didn't want to binge another show online. And despite his age, Izuku did understand commerce enough to grasp buying used things. But he never did so prior because nothing was of note, and his mother was often too busy to travel with him to buy things. Over on his bed, Mika woke up from her power nap and stretched. "I'm going back to the rabbit den for my weekly report. Please summon me back in a few hours." "Got it." With that, Mika vanished in smoke, and Izuku was alone again. Once in a while, he would summon the wolf triplets and continue with language lessons for them as well, which then reminded him to get names for all 3. He tested their individual affinities, and found that all 3 had separate ones, making the naming quite easy. The eldest, a boy, had the lightning affinity, and got the name Raijin after the Japanese god of lightning. The middle child, a female, had water as her affinity, and Suijin was her new name. The final pup, the youngest and male, had a wind element, and was named Fujin. When the pups reported their new names to Ichiro, the boss was overjoyed to learn the 3 had names of deities, and had promptly told them to build up their own strength so as never to fail the expectations of Izuku. The summoner wanted to tell the triplets that he didn't expect anything of them, and would prefer they went their own pace, but didn't have the heart to do so after watching the 3 wrestle for strength training. It was rather adorable. When Izuku summoned the 3 for the first time, he made sure to introduce them to his mother, who made a slightly offhanded comment about wolf fur. But she accepted that the wolves would be a rare occurrence, and would not stay overnight like Mika did. As he thought about the past couple of weeks, he mindlessly scrolled down when something caught his eye. He scrolled back up and promptly froze. It couldn't be right. The front picture showed a flat 8-like shape, with white coloring and a black border. It possessed a white bar that went through its center, and a small hook on the handle. What was also striking was the 6 tones that were adorned on the item, almost like they were emulating Sharingan eyes. Madara Uchiha's fan gun by. He hesitantly clicked on the page, almost afraid that he had been imagining it when it loaded. There it was. Izuku nervously swallowed. He read the description of the selling page. Apparently, the seller's grandfather had bought it some time ago, and when the man passed, the grandson helped his mother clean out the old man's home. She let him post it for sale to see if anyone was interested in it. Apparently neither were the sentimental type, and would rather keep the old photos of the recently deceased man than any of his larger items. And the price, 26,000 yen. Izuku felt the urge to scream, a one-of-a-kind, indestructible war fan, and it was going for a measly $200. That thing was a priceless artifact that should be worth millions on the history alone. How on earth did it end up with a random old man? Better question, how didn't Orochimaru find it first? It was a unique item where forgeries couldn't even mimic a third of the original's power. But before he did something rash, Izuku closed his eyes and counted to 10 with a breathing exercise. When he opened them again, the fan was still on the computer. He promptly unplugged at the laptop and left the room to bug his mother, who was currently in the living room. He put the laptop down on the coffee table right under her eyesight. Inko looked down and raised an eyebrow on the item page. "Izuku, what are you doing on sites like these? That's not important right now." "What is this?" Inko took a closer look at. Something in her memory was being tickled, but she didn't understand what exactly she was looking at. "What is that?" she asked as she pointed at the screen. She was confused, both by the item and the grim determination on her son's face. "Madara Uchiha's war fan." Inko blanched. Izuku had, of course, told her stories about the shinobi world and some of its history. But Madara Uchiha was especially frightening to hear about. A man who could puppeteer, even from beyond the grave. A man who could and did crush literal armies. A man so powerful, if the history wasn't embellished at all, could perform feats of godhood and would be able to annihilate the strongest ever in the modern world. You want to buy this?" She looked hesitant as Izuku nodded. Why would you want this weapon? Wasn't it a symbol of terror back in the shinobi era? It was an appropriate question, but she prayed it would be for the sake that it was simply a relic, and not something Izuku actively wanted to use. Izuku met his mother's eyes, who flinched when she saw his determination. Because I might be the only one in the world who has the right to use that weapon, he said, as his eyes shifted to his Sharingan. He didn't tell Inko about his eyes back when he had returned, simply because he wanted to first see what his limits were with his single tome. These past 2 weeks were especially helpful, as he worked out seeing the world in slow motion. None of the journals had ever mentioned the Sharingan needing training to use its abilities, but it makes sense. The Uchiha might have self-damaging pride, but even they had to train their bodies. Izuku, why your eyes? How did Izuku do that? Are those really the Sharingan he occasionally mentions when talking about shinobi? How does he have them? It was far too many questions far too fast, and Inko loving, kind, and slightly overbearing nature couldn't take it. Everything went black for her. When Inko woke up, she saw her son staring down at her with panic and an undertone of joy. And Mom? Are you okay? Inko could feel her heart ache a bit, both figuratively and literally. She never told her son, but she always had a weaker than average heart. That didn't mean that she was in danger of heart attacks, but that when her blood pressure hit over a certain level, usually during high levels of stress or fear, she would pass out. She often lied in the past, often claiming she was simply tired and had nodded off in the moment or had exhausted herself crying so much. She did also take medication to help, but a weak heart is still weak. It's also why she typically avoids looking at anything graphic, simply because the fear could make her pass out. I'm fine, Izuku. That was a lie. Everything from back when Izuku first showed her the lab to now simply took its toll on her, building up pressure. Honestly, she should have long passed out after everything she witnessed. But she couldn't. Her son needed a strong, confident mother. But despite that tough act she puts on, she was still weak, something she hated herself for. The only happiness she gets from the whole charade is that Izuku did not inherit her weakened condition, having inherited his biological father's overall physical health. And the thought brought sadness. How long has it been since she's last heard word? Even in an email, Hisashi still sent the occasional personal check to help pay for Izuku's things, but it wasn't all that much to live off of. Not that she used any of the money on herself. After she paid for Izuku's various bills whenever the check came, she would put whatever remained in a bank account for her child. It's why she still works, albeit on her own hours. She would never stoop to the level of stealing from her own flesh and blood. She, however, didn't tell him this, opting to either tell him once he entered high school or written in her will. She pushed herself upwards. I'm perfectly fine, just a bit tired. She prayed Izuku would buy it, and for a moment, his face twisted into a look of grim focus, but then it relaxed. Okay, Mom. She gave a small smile. The war fan. You wanted it, right? She was calm now. She could understand why he would want something like it. She may not know everything it could do, but if a powerful person like Madara Uchiha used it reliably, she could understand. Izuku bashfully rubbed his head. I want to make sure it's real first. That makes sense. She didn't know how he would test it, but she trusted he would know how to. I'll send a message. Maybe we can go sometime tomorrow afternoon, after I get off work? Izuku let out a blindingly pure smile. Okay, Mom, I'm surprised you were interested in such a thing. It's not what I would consider a practical item in any sense. The man selling the gun was dressed casually, wearing a green and blue striped shirt and a pair of slightly worn jeans. He rubbed the slight bit of brown stubble on his face and short brown hair. Standing next to him was Inko, looking at her son. Izuku had spent about 3 minutes staring at the gun. From this angle, the seller couldn't see his active Sharingan taking in every detail. It had a slight layer of dust, but less than you'd expect for something that was kept in storage. Izuku shut off his dojutsu before meeting the blue eyes of the seller. Well, Mom did say I could buy something for my birthday, and I thought it looked pretty. That was a lie. He didn't want the seller to pick up on his desire for the thing and jack up the price suddenly. Can I pick it up? The man shrugged. He was a little creeped out by how intense the child's aura was. The seller's quirk, aura sense, allowed him to get the general mood off of people. He could feel the deceit in the boy's voice and mood, but at the same time, he could feel a lot of strength. He once had the opportunity to get near a sidekick for a top 10 hero, and that guy had nothing on this kid. Hell, if he wasn't certain the boy and mother were related, he might have guessed the boy was some undercover hero. Izuku grabbed hold of the war fan, and immediately felt the subtle chakra drain of the weapon. It would appear that people with active networks would feel the drain of using these kinds of tools, while those with dormant networks would not. But it confirmed that the war fan was real. He lifted it up, and a small gust of wind came off the weapon, knocking a framed photo off the wall. Oh, Cammy, I'm so sorry. He hastily apologized, dropping the fan. The seller looked moderately surprised. He could feel all the emotions, joy, excitement, shock, and oddly enough a sense of longing now satisfied. But then the shock overpowered the rest, and the kid dropped the item. It was then that he began to suspect that the oddly shaped item was something powerful and dangerous, and if it was dangerous, he should just hand it over to the police. But when he looks at the kid, he can see the pure emotions on his face and in his aura. He might have lied about the birthday, but the kid genuinely wants the thing. Well, what's the verdict? You want it, kid? Izuku slowly bent down and picked up the fan, putting it on his back. The seller didn't know how he was doing that, but Izuku was using chakra as hooks to hold the gunbai to his back. However, it did look a little ridiculous considering the war fan was far taller than the kid, but that didn't matter. Izuku looked at his mother, who opened her bag. She pulled out a wad of cash, and with a quick counting, the seller nodded. Pleasure doing business with you. Izuku took a few steps towards the door, before stopping. You wouldn't happen to have anything else odd in nature from your grandfather, right? The shinobi in training asked. He wanted to be sure that the old man didn't have anything else. The seller took a thoughtful look. When I go over what grandfather left, I do believe there was one more thing. He took a step towards the cabinet, opened it, and pulled out a tightly bound scroll. Whatever it is, I can't read it. And unlike what I just sold you, it didn't seem nearly as valuable, just some old paper. I was just going to throw it away. You want it? The seller asked. Free of charge. Izuku took a close look at the scroll, which was labeled supplies. The seller probably didn't even realize, but he was correct. If it was merely supplies, and not some jutsu or unique weapon, it probably isn't much. Especially if one couldn't unseal it. But it never hurt to get more things. Yes, please. The seller tossed it to Izuku, who opened the small bag he carried, and put it with his personal supplies scroll. As Izuku and Inko left, the seller thought to himself, I sincerely hope I didn't just make a mistake. When Izuku got home, he immediately unsealed the scroll in his room. The first thing he did was remove any of the old food rations. It didn't matter how long it's been, food does not last thousands of years, even flash frozen. The next was he did audit of the things inside. In medical supplies, an unopened bottle of disinfectant, likely bad as well, 3 rolls of clean bandages, and 20 emergency chakra pills. Really basic first aid stuff. In the weapon side, there was 100 kunai, 500 meters of wire, 50 shuriken, and 25 exploding tags which needed a chakra recharge, as the creator's chakra had long since dispersed. But what was a very interesting find was a tanto. He would have to compare it to the set that Orochimaru kept in storage, but it looked like a hidden leaf-made weapon. Like with most standard tanto, it was made of chakra-conductive metal, and looked to be in very good shape, which meant Roku could use it, as during Kenjutsu training, Izuku noticed he tended to favor a more samurai style of swordplay. Izuku had been hesitant to give Roku one of the blades from storage, as they might have been the last of their kind, but this one would easily suit him. The Uzumaki descendant was getting a bit annoyed having to use a wooden blade. Izuku only wishes he could find a proper instructor, but the quirk bias was still well and present for Roku. If he couldn't get a master to teach him, he would only be a half-decent shinobi swordsman. Not that it was a bad thing, considering the use of chakra would help Roku crush anyone else who wasn't a chakra user, but his form would never be natural for him. Izuku would keep looking, but the tanto reminded him of another sword that was currently sitting in a special seal made by Orochimaru. A sword that, if he's correct, only Yumi can truly master. But first, she needed to learn her ancestor's special jutsu and undergo the jutsu all Miss Swordsman underwent. Hi guys! Izuku said, letting off one of his patented sunshine grins. He was currently absent of his gunbai, but still happy. He looked at Heavy, Roku, and Yumi. How has your last month been? Roku gave a brief grunt but went first. I managed to get to a more than acceptable level in the water jutsu you gave me, and have been practicing at home with my swordplay. Izuku nodded. It was as good as he hoped. Heavy went second. I'm now at 3 times Earth's gravity in weight. My body hurts a lot, but I go to the local clinic to heal any bruising. Unfortunately, I don't believe I can go beyond this anytime soon, and request I receive some new material to read until my body catches up. That was perfectly understandable. Heavy can't use regular ninjutsu, so he was limited to strengthening his body. Maybe it was time to introduce him to the 8 inner gate scrolls that were originally written by Mike Guy and Rock Lee. But not beyond the first 2 gates. None of them had true healing capabilities, and too many questions would be asked if Heavy regularly came in with broken bones. Yumi let off a large grin that mirrored Izuku's earlier one. All my jutsu have been mastered, and I can do water walking for over an hour. My mother isn't happy with how I've destroyed part of the yard, especially since I couldn't explain it to her, but I'm happy. Not only that, but I can now lift up to twice my own weight. That was perfect. But first, he needed to hand out things to Roku and Heavy. Izuku pulled out a scroll from his bag. Roku, in this scroll in a standard shinobi tanto. And the leaf A and B you Black Ops Kenjutsu forms. Please avoid using the real blade until you can do the forms first. You might lose an arm. Izuku tossed the scroll at Roku, who haphazardly caught it before looking at the scroll in amazement. The green-haired child looked at Heavy before pulling out another scroll, decidedly different. It was black, with the word forbidden written on it. Within this scroll were more scrolls that had translated copies of the easier-to-learn kenjutsu that Orochimaru had collected. To further protect the scroll, it was hidden behind a blood seal lock only Izuku could open. He sat down, unsealed it, and rolled it out looking for the seal that held to 5 of the 8 inner gates. He removed the 5 scrolls from the storage seal, grabbed one, and sealed the other 4 back up. And here is how to unlock the first inner gate of the 8 gates technique. This will take many weeks to get right, but if you can, you'll be able to temporarily bypass the body's natural limits. If you can do that, and keep up your strength training, I'll give you the second gate scroll. Heavy's face became extremely bright at that. To know that he could follow the path of his ancestor was a huge honor to him. Yumi. She flinched. There was something in his amused tone that spoke of danger to her. Today is going to be painful for you. He pulled out a scroll that simply said shark teeth. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. Yumi screamed out as she felt her teeth rearrange themselves over the course of 30 minutes. She alternated between glaring at Izuku and lying on the ground in very debilitating pain. Why on earth did I agree to this? She asked herself before she let out a weak groan of pain. It sounded vaguely like WHYYYYYYY. The 7 ninja swordsmen of the mist had a simple philosophy. Always kill the enemy. If you lose your arms, use your legs, and if you lose your legs, use your teeth. That's why every swordman always had sharpened teeth. To rip out necks out if needed to. Besides, if you want to respect ninja tool I have sealed away, you need the teeth. Izuku was completely unrepentant, understanding the shinobi's lust of sadism. Besides, some people like the shark teeth, if the mutation quirks were anything to go by. She should have no trouble finding a partner in the future should she be interested in such. She pushed herself upwards, her teeth tender and raw. Her scathing glare still did nothing on Izuku. Oh, alright, fine. Guess I've had my fun. He cycled through a few hand signs before placing his hand to her closed mouth. She blinked, and the pain blessed to a manageable degree. She hesitantly opened her mouth and ran her tongue across the teeth. Careful, they're extremely sharp. Until they dull a bit, you could bite off a piece of your tongue, Izuku said as he handed Yumi his mother's pocket mirror. She bared her now shark-like teeth and ran a finger across the zigzag pattern. She hesitantly cleared her throat. How am I going to tell my parents? She spoke slowly, trying to avoid biting anything. Izuku scratched his cheek. Maybe it's time to tell them what you've been doing. I mean, shinobi training is very difficult, and it'll only get harder to disguise it. While Yumi was busy checking out her new teeth, Izuku unsealed 2 scrolls. On one was written, Sharkskin, and on the other was Hozuki clan techniques. Izuku didn't want to try and move Sharkskin to a new scroll, as he had no clue how to properly write the special time-freeze seals that Orochimaru designed. He cleared his throat. Yumi looked at him. In my right hand is Hozuki family techniques. I am respectful of family jutsu, so these are to be learned and taught at your will. Make good use of them. He handed her the scroll, who looked at it like it was a one-of-a-kind art piece. In my other hand is the Samahata or Sharkskin. Do not open this until you can subconsciously use the water transformation technique. Samahata is sentient, and if it finds you lacking, it will stab you with its spines. Yumi sweated as she stared at the unreadable scroll. Kind of scary to know that whatever it was, it would hurt her if she was seen as bad. Maybe you can keep it, and I'll try later? Izuku shook his head. Samahata feeds on chakra, and it needs a small steady stream of its would-be wielder. I can't do it, he said. Just study your family jutsu, and you'll be fine. Yumi felt a little uneasy. But she was still determined to reach her potential, even if she dreaded how her parents might react to all this. Izuku checked in with Heavy and Roku. Heavy was busy with some one-handed push-ups, while Roku was swinging his wooden blade around, casually glancing at propped-up scroll. Izuku, having studied the kenjutsu with his Sharingan, spent the next half hour helping him iron out the forms a bit. I need a proper instructor, Roku muttered to himself. Izuku could tell it wasn't a slight against him, but couldn't help the shame of not being a better teacher. Both of them had tried their hardest to seek out professional swordsman instructors, but were always turned away for being quirkless. It wasn't just Roku, but Izuku as well, who wanted to at least be competent with a blade. At this point, either was ready to just put out an ad for a private instructor. Over with Heavy, who had switched to leg kicks, he was feeling strong. For all his life, he had been weak in everybody else's eyes, even people who didn't say that verbally, but he was remarkably good at reading others. It often hurt to see even family consider him weak. But he was strong, and he was proving it every day. With everyone so preoccupied, it soon turned dark, and Heavy and Yumi's individual guardians came to pick them up. Yumi, why haven't you touched your food? Yumi's slightly posh mother asked. The wealthy family of 3 were sitting at a custom-made hardwood table, enjoying a well-made meal by the cook they hired for evenings. Both of her parents were often busy day to day and never made food themselves. Yumi looked away from her mother. Ever since she got home, she had avoided opening her mouth. "Look me in the eye, young lady. What are you hiding?" Yumi still did not make eye contact. "What happened today? Did you get in trouble? Did you see something you weren't supposed to? Is it a boy?" Yumi's father froze at that last question. Yumi shook her head in desperation before she suddenly blurted out, "It's not that, Mom." The room had gone quiet as Yumi's parents stared at her. "Princess," her father's voice cut in. "Let me see your teeth." Yumi fidgeted in her seat. "Now!" Her father almost never raised his voice. She bared her teeth to her parents, where her mother made a slight gasp. "What happened to your teeth?" "Well," she awkwardly said, rubbing her head. "The story goes like this." Over the next hour, she explains the shinobi and their general history. How she was now learning chakra, and how she was proud to be a student of shinobi arts. "No, I absolutely forbid it," her mother yells once she took a few minutes to process this. "You are a young girl. You should not be doing something that could potentially kill you." Her mother went on a rant for another 5 minutes until she said the wrong thing. "You are the heiress to our money, and to put you, a quirkless child, in danger is dash." And then the matriarch slapped her hand over her mouth. But it was too late, the damage was already done. Unconsciously, Yumi began to leak out killing intent, and her parents paled. "So it's because I'm quirkless? Defective? Weaker? And no I," the mother stuttered. "I don't care about the money. And I don't care about whatever plans you have for me as heiress. I've finally found something I can get behind, something I enjoy, and you want to take it away from me because you see me as a weak, defenseless girl. No, I'm a shinobi, much like Suigetsu Hozuki, of the Hozuki clan, and I'm going to return to those roots." Yumi screamed out, her face enraged. This sudden spike of emotion had opened up another hole that her parents left. "Our family is simply 3 people who live together. When was the last time you took an active interest in what I wanted to do? When was the last time I could come to you with my problems? How long has it been since I simply spent time with either of you? And why did you even bother to have a child if you aren't going to care for it?" That last question was closer to a whisper. The parents felt as if they had been struck. "I found people I care about, and in the short time I've known them, they've showed me more support than either of you in my memories. Both of you are constantly gone, out making money or business connections, while I'm alone most days with nobody but my babysitter watching me. The afternoons I go to see Izuku, Roku, and Heavy are the time where I truly feel alive." Yumi felt tears leak out of her eyes. This was many years in the making. She abruptly stood up and ran for her room. She hastily grabbed her phone and various scrolls she had received from Izuku before throwing the scrolls in an empty bag. She didn't want her parents to find and destroy them. She opened her window and jumped outside, just in time for her parents to barge into her room and see her. They rushed to the window to watch as she landed perfectly and ran off with a chakra-enhanced sprint. In the past, Izuku had told all 3 of his students where he could be found if they needed a place to stay for whatever reason. This of course prompted Roku to share his apartment as well to serve as a safe spot. But Izuku's was closer, and Yumi had memorized the general direction from her house and the street it was on. She hopped from roof to roof, avoiding almost all of the underground heroes who were just starting their shifts. Unknown to her, a pair of exhausted eyes were intently watching her once she entered the Mustafa district, but did not give chase as they could see how upset she was. No need to add a mark to a record for public quirk usage. Yumi landed in front of the apartment complex that the Midoriyas lived in. She made her way to the number that was given to her. She tapped on the door, and could hear a young voice say that he would get it. The door swung open. "Yumi?" Izuku was standing there with Inko right behind him. She nodded and gave a sniff. "Telling my parents didn't go so well. Can I stay the night and confront them in the morning?" she asked, slightly abashed. Inko moved Izuku aside and brought the distraught girl in. Come in, come in! Izuku and I were about to have dinner. We usually have leftovers, but we have enough for a 3rd person." Inko guided the young Hozuki into the shared dining and kitchen space. Yumi took a look around. It was a small place, and yet it felt far more homely than that large house ever did. Inko set out another set of dishes and filled the plate with some plain rice and a side of curry. She gestured for Yumi to sit down before she and Izuku joined the girl at the table. She hesitantly took a bite, and it was enough to bring more tears to her. "Why are you crying? Is the food really that bad?" Inko looked on the verge of a panic. Yumi shook her head. "No, it's not that. It's not the most delicious food I've ever eaten, and yet I can feel more love in this dish than anything my parents had the hired chef cook up." Yumi let off another sniff. "Thank you for letting me stay the night." Yumi laid on the bed peacefully asleep. Inko might have had slight reservations about her and Izuku sharing a room, but he had sworn he would sleep on the futon and let her have his bed. Izuku looked up from his still illuminated desk and stared at her. Why did I tell her to do that? Is it my fault? He silently thought to himself. Despite the lack of contact with his former bullies, he still possessed that little bit of self-deprecating emotions from back then. But back to the girl at hand. Yumi had fallen asleep, emotionally exhausted about a half hour after dinner. Izuku and Inko both put her to bed when she crashed on the couch. Izuku then felt a nuzzle in his arm. He looked down at Mika, who he had just summoned a few minutes earlier. What exactly happened? Who is she? Mika asked. She wanted answers, but Izuku had shushed her when he first summoned her. Let me leave the room first, then I'll say. Izuku quietly opened the door, watching for any reaction from Yumi, before slipping out and closing the door. Okay, her name is Yumi Hozuki, and she is one of my 3 students. She had a fight with her parents, so she's staying the night. Did she at least tell them she was alright? Yeah. Before she fell asleep, she sent a text to her parents to not call the police, and that she'll be back in the morning. Despite what she might think, I'm going with her. I can't let her face this alone. After all, I'm responsible, Mika scoffed. How could it be your fault? If I didn't give Yumi her shark teeth and tell her to speak to her parents, she wouldn't be in this mess. Again, how is that your fault? You were looking out for a student of yours and giving her valid advice. As for the shark teeth, she would need them anyways if she wanted to be a successor to the Miss Swordsman. And yes, I did peek in her bag when you weren't looking, Mika said. Besides, how could you have predicted what the parents might say? Izuku was silent. Maybe, he muttered in his native tongue. Mika suddenly perked up. Oh, Izuku, you didn't tell us you had students. Were they a recent thing, or was it before you signed our contract? Despite being a rabbit, Mika gave off a terrifying aura. I might not have mentioned that I was training students, but for less than a year. None of them actually have the chakra capacity to summon animals yet, and none can understand the old language as I've yet to find a time to teach them proper. He prayed that pacified Mika enough. The rabbit let out a sigh. Fine, guess I can't fault you there. But you are going to introduce me in the morning to her and introduce me to your other 2 students when you next meet them. Izuku couldn't say no. Chapter 10. A Bet, a Blonde, and a Bijou. Yumi groaned, turning her head over. She peeked an eye open to see an unfamiliar ceiling. Where am I? She asked before it all came back to her. Oh, right. She had stayed the night at Izuku's after fighting with her parents. She pushed herself up from the bed and looked around the all-night-themed room. She glanced down and saw Izuku sleeping on a futon. And resting next to his head was an orange rabbit. That's an odd color, Yumi thought. She instinctively yawned. On the ground, one of the rabbit's ears twitched as its head rose. The rabbit shook its head to banish its sleepiness and breathed a blast of hot air in Izuku's face. He immediately shot awake. I'm up. He looked around before glaring at the rabbit. Damn it, Mika. Why'd you do that? Izuku asked. Because your student is up. Shouldn't you be more aware of your surroundings, Izuku-sama? You are a shinobi, the rabbit asked. Yumi blinked. Is the rabbit a summon? She thought to herself. Izuku had told his 3 students about the many things of the shinobi world, including the existence of summons. And then, another thought came to mind. What a cute summon, she verbally said, gaining the attention of both Izuku and Mika. What did she say? Mika asked her summoner. She called you cute, Izuku said. Mika seemed to visibly puff up in pride at that. I suppose I should get introductions out of the way. Yumi, this is Mika of the Rabbit Clan. She is one of the 4 summons I regularly call when at home. He then turned to Mika. Mika, this is Yumi Hozuki, one of my 3 students. She possesses a water affinity, and I hope she can one day become the leader of the new 7 ninja swordsmen. Mika hopped up on the bed and bowed her head. A pleasure. Same, Yumi said. She wasn't sure what exactly Mika had said after all. The Hozuki turned back to her teacher. Izuku, you said one of 4 summons? She asked. Oh, right. Izuku bit his right thumb and went through a hand seal sequence. Summoning Jutsu. He slammed his bleeding hand on the ground and 3 plumes of smoke appeared. From the 3 came tiny wolf pups. Yumi froze upon seeing the tiny animals. Yumi? Are you all right? Izuku asked. Yumi suddenly squealed, causing Izuku, Mika, and the wolf triplets to flinch at the loud noise. And faster than they could see, the 3 wolves were enveloped by Yumi in a sudden bear hug. You 3 are just so adorable. Let us go, Suijin said, trying to breathe. Please, Raijin said. Izuku-sama, help, Fuijin asked the green-haired summoner. Okay. Yumi, please let them go before they pass out from lack of air, Izuku asked his student. Oh, Yumi said. She let go of the triplets with a pout. She looked at her teacher. Did you get summons when you disappeared for a month? Izuku nodded. Yeah. I used the summoning jutsu without a contract, reverse summoning me to a forest that was shared between the wolves and the rabbits. The wolves found me first. So, I spent a week with the triplets here as a survival test. Once that was up, I signed the Grey Wolf contract and was immediately dragged off to fight a red rabbit. It was a close fight, but I ended up beating the rabbit and signed the rabbit contract. Could I try summoning? Yumi asked. Izuku shook his head. You don't currently have the chakra requirements to do so. But if you manage to earn the favor of the blade I gave you, you should have enough chakra to use the summoning jutsu. Samahata had the side effect of increasing the natural reserves of its wielders, so Yumi would have the necessary chakra to summon animals. And after her, Roku would have the chakra reserves to also use summons, as he was much older. If he wanted to. Roku was taking quite well after the samurai style of fighting, and samurai didn't use summons. Should I try now? Yumi asked. Did you master the water transformation jutsu of the Hozuki clan? Izuku asked. Yumi flinched and looked away in guilt. Izuku sighed. Samahata, the blade sealed in the scroll I gave you, stabs people's hands should it find them unworthy to wield it. I don't have enough medical ninjutsu knowledge to heal such a wound, so don't unseal Samahata until you can transform your body into water and back again. It was annoying to repeat oneself, but both of them hadn't even hit double digits in age. Kids tended to forget things when excitable, right? Yumi groaned out. Izuku turned to the wolf triplets. If you wish to dismiss yourselves, go right ahead. Yumi and I have some business to take care of. Boring business. He emphasized that point, as the triplets were easily bored. 3 puffs of smoke confirmed his suspicions. Kaa-san will be up in a few minutes, Yumi. We should get ready for the day, and after breakfast, meet with your parents. Izuku said. All right. Yumi murmured. Izuku gave her first dibs on using the bathroom, before following suit. In the time he was in there, Inko had woken up to start the day, her head full of bed hair. Murmuring Izuku, Inko muttered under her breath to her son as she passed him in the hall. She wasn't a morning person, but forced herself to get up regardless. She usually had a small amount of coffee made automatically as well. Not a lot, as she was the only adult living there, and her heart problems forced her to limit herself, but enough to function in the mornings. When Inko got out of the restroom, she notably had her hair properly done, and seemed to have awakened somewhat. Izuku and Yumi served themselves some breakfast, as Mika ate a couple of pieces of celery from the fridge. The mother had her cup of coffee, and fixed herself some of her own breakfast with yogurt and berries. You two are going to Yumi's house, right? To talk to her parents? Have you texted them yet? I have not. Yumi admitted. You should do that. They might be able to send a car to pick both of you up. If not, I can send a notice to my boss that I'll be late and take you through transit. Today was one of the days Inko worked, so the timing wasn't ideal, but they had options. And if I can't get in late, I can ask Roku to make his way here and take you there. He did get a driver's license recently, so he can rent a car for the day, and I can pay him back. Yumi pulled her phone out of her pocket and stared at it. She took a deep breath and pressed on a contact. She put the phone to her ear and listened for the ringing. She chose to call her father instead of her mother for 2 reasons. The first was he usually got up an hour earlier than her mother to take care of any urgent business that happened the night before, and the second was that he was the more silent type of parent. Hey, Dad, she began as the man picked up. She quickly explained what had happened overnight, and how she and a friend would need to be driven over there to work out issues. It was a rather awkward call as her father remained silent throughout most of it, forcing her to feel even more guilty. She ended the call after she told him the address of the Midoriya apartment, and he confirmed that he would send a driver to pick them up. Dad is sending his driver here. About 30 minutes, Yumi told him. Izuku and Inko nodded. She got up from the table. I'll get my things. Izuku finished up and raced to his room. He quickly sealed up his various things in a spare scroll and mounted the gunbai on his back. It might come in handy. He nodded to Mika, who disappeared in a puff of smoke. Then, both he and Yumi went outside to wait for the car to pull up. They didn't have to wait long as the car pulled up 10 minutes later. It was a nice car, American imported, and wasn't the absence large type Izuku was praying wouldn't show up. A limo would ask too many questions. They both rode in the back in silence, as the driver spared a few glances back there. The total drive time was almost a half hour due to morning traffic, but they eventually arrived, where the driver pulled up in a parking garage with 4 other vehicles. Both Izuku and Yumi got out before the driver could open the door for them. Yumi walked up to the door connecting to the main house before reaching out and hesitating. She felt a hand on her shoulder and looked to see Izuku smile at her. Yumi took a deep breath and pushed open the door. Then she felt herself be enveloped and dragged away from Izuku. Yumi! You're safe, Yumi's mother said as she hugged her only child heavily, before turning and glaring at Izuku. You must be the bad influence. Get out. Izuku narrowed his eyes. No. I'm here to support my student's decision. You don't get a choice in the matter. I'm Yumi's mother, and what I decide for my daughter is best for her, the matriarch said. So get out. I never said I made the choice. Yumi makes the choice, Izuku replied. And I'd like to see you force me out. Humph, I have friends and family in high places. She turned to look at her husband and a second man standing in the hallway. Blast man, please escort this kidnapper to the nearest police station, Yumi gasped. Mom's cousin. I'm the same age as Yumi. I couldn't have kidnapped her, even if I wanted to. Izuku tried to reason out. Shit, she brought in a top 50s hero. Guess when you have family, friends, and money, you have sway. Blast Man possessed a quirk that allowed him to send out raw energy blasts from his hands. However, due to a lack of creativity on his part, and a lack of rapid-fire ability for his quirk, he remained solidly in the top 50. The pro hero raised his hand, which started to glow. Don't care, kid. You're coming with me, even if I have to knock you out first. Izuku grasped the handle of his gun by, his Sharingan activated. He quickly ran past Yumi and her mother, and held the gun by in front of him. You'll try, and you'll lose, Izuku said, as if it was a fact of life. The hero in a rage sent off an energy blast at the gun by. Izuku simply grinned. Idiot. The blast met the tool head-on, only to be absorbed by the fan. What? Was the only thing the hero could say before the gun by was shoved in his face. Uchiha reflection. When energy hits the gun by, the fan absorbs it, and when chakra is pumped into the weapon, the energy is released in an opposing force equal to the energy initially inputted. The gun by glowed, before blasting the pro hero back into a wall. The wall was made of brick, so he wouldn't go through it, but he would likely have a concussion from the impact. Izuku turned to Yumi's mother, Sharingan spitting menacingly. Any other pro heroes here that you called for? He asked as the matriarch let Yumi go in shock. The young girl quickly distanced herself from her mother, and stood by Izuku's side. I'll have you arrested for quick use. The woman tried to reason. Then it's a good thing I test genetically quirkless, Izuku explained. Although you should be more worried about the pro hero attacking a child. Imagine what it would do to the Hozuki family name if such a story got out. And I'm certain Kazuki-san of Shueisha Publishing would love such a scoop. Chitose Kazuki was a woman who would do almost anything for a big story. The matriarch flinched as she glared at the young shinobi. Now, Izuku began. Aren't you going to offer your guest a drink? Kinji and his wife Izana Hozuki sat down, looking at Izuku and Yumi sitting opposite of them. He wasn't all that thrilled about what Yumi had secretly been doing, but he also wasn't thrilled about what his wife had done behind his back. She justified her cousin being present as moral support and to protect Yumi from a deranged teacher, only for said teacher to be as old as Yumi, but much stronger than the pro hero. Mom, Dad, Yumi began. I first started to learn about chakra when I was invited to a Quirkless meetup with others from the chat server I'm a part of. I originally thought that it was something like a self-defense class, but soon learned Izuku meant these supernatural abilities humans once had. Tens of thousands of years ago, humanity could shift the very earth, or change the weather, and we did it better than heroes can in the modern age. I want to learn more about chakra, the shinobi arts, and my ancestor, Suigetsu of the Hozuki clan. Who is Suigetsu Hozuki? Kinji asked. It was best if he had a full understanding of what his daughter was doing. Her explanation the previous night was one done quickly and haphazardly. Izuku took over. Suigetsu Hozuki was the last member of his clan, the Hozuki clan. The clan was native to the Land of Water, a nation, and to Kirigakure, a village within the Land of Water. He, and the majority of his clan, possessed the ability to transform bodies into water and back, with a few exceptions to that roster. Like Genjutsu Hozuki. Suigetsu was also the younger brother to Mangetsu Hozuki, the former leader of the 7 ninja swordsmen of the mist. How exactly do you know Yumi is his descendant? Kinji asked the green-haired shinobi. Technically, all humans are descendants of those old shinobi. You only have to go back 5,000 years to find a common ancestor. It's just that some families had better luck keeping the genetics. And the fact that Yumi looks like a younger, more feminine Suigetsu didn't hurt. Izuku pulled out one of the few pictures Orochimaru had kept, which had Suigetsu, Karen, Yugo, and Sasuke all posing together. You could tell Sasuke wasn't a big fan, but Suigetsu likely dragged him into it. Izuku pointed to the grinning swordsman. Kinji looked at the old photo. Fair point. But how did all this information survive for so long? A shinobi by the name of Orochimaru was capable of sealing away all of his, or rather their things, with a preservation seal. It was only through dumb luck that I stumbled upon his hidden underground base. Originally, when Izuku first read the journals, did he come across the word non-binary. He didn't understand at the time, but with age, began to understand things better. It was a surprise to learn about the spectrum of emotions and orientations, but better to learn young than to mess up later. Kinji turned and looked at his daughter. Yumi, do you truly wish to continue this? You're the heiress to 2 wealthy individuals, and an only child considering how hard it was for your mother to carry just you. Is learning this chakra truly something you want to spend your life doing? He understood enough that what Yumi was learning was a lifelong process, so she couldn't suddenly switch to something else. Yes. As somebody with no quirk, I'm a weak little girl. But as a shinobi, I'm strong. By the time I'm an adult, I could be stronger than the likes of Endeavor, she confidently said. She's not joking. Many shinobi were incredibly strong, Izuku explained. Kisame Hashigaki, for instance, was capable of flooding entire canyons with torrents of water. Zabuza Momochi was capable of taking out an entire army of bandits with both his arms non-functional, and Amiri Ringo was capable of wielding lighting almost on par with the Reikichs. To put that in perspective, any one of those ninja swordsmen would be able to fight a top 10 hero, bar All Might, and come out on top. Izuku commented. Kinji looked at his daughter, then at his wife. I'll give my approval. Both of them looked at Kinji in shock. So long as you explain what you're learning, and you don't slack off in your normal studies. But Kinji, Izana began, it's not safe for her. Just look at her teeth, she's already been mutilated. Yumi glared at her mother for that comment. Sometimes, being a parent means supporting your kid over worrying for their safety. That's what my parents taught me at least, Kinji pointed out. Yumi, I have not been as active as a parent should be, so I'm sorry. I thank you, Dad, Yumi murmured. Mrs. Hozuki, Izuku began. What will it take for you to accept your daughter's decision? He asked. The matriarch didn't answer. How about a bet? For a month, I will personally see to Yumi's training. When she returns, she can fight that cousin of yours or anyone else for that matter. If she wins, will you then accept your daughter has the right to become strong by her own merits? All three Hozuki looked at Izuku like he was crazy. Bullshit. There's no way you could make somebody that's strong that quickly, Izana said. There is, trust me. By the time the month is up, she'll be running circles around most seasoned heroes. Fine. Excellent. Now, as you requested, Mr. Hozuki, I'll explain what Yumi is doing. When I first unlocked her chakra, she did chakra control exercises. Walking up walls, standing on top of water, that sort of thing. And yes, that is possible. It's rather basic for shinobi. I also had her train in some strength training for muscle growth. He paused, letting it sink in. Afterwards, I tested her elemental affinity. Those with chakra typically have affinities for one of 5 natures: earth, wind, fire, lightning, and water. I'm a wind primary affinity and fire secondary affinity. Yumi is a water affinity. Affinities usually mean we have talent in certain types of jutsu. So, while I could use earth-style ninjutsu, it would take more chakra than, say, a fire style of similar power. Currently, I've only been giving Yumi water-style ninjutsu, with a few non-elemental jutsu for good measure. Water is usually a combination of offense and defense, depending on the jutsu cast. And right now, Yumi is learning the Hozuki clan's water transformation jutsu. This allows her to turn her body into liquid and back, negating physical damage. However, that means in her liquid state, she's susceptible to electrical attacks, so that will also be a lesson to learn. And after she's mastered the transformation jutsu, she'll try to wield the Samahata. What is Samahata? Kinji asked. Samahata is one of the 7 blades of Kirigakure. Every one of those blades possesses a unique ability that can be used by their wielder. All the blades are quasi-sentient, meaning they choose whether the user is a good match or not. And Samahata is unique as it possesses 2 abilities, rather than just one. Its primary ability is to absorb chakra from opponents, and its second ability is to act independently of its wielder. It is the only blade that happens to be alive. I see. Is there any danger to wielding this sword? Kinji asked, a bit worried for Yumi's safety. Samahata is a blade that doesn't cut, but shreds. However, most of the time, it's wrapped in bandages, so it doesn't pose a threat to its wielder. But if somebody the blade doesn't approve of grasp its handle, it tends to lash out with sharp spines. Kinji and Izana stilled. That's why I'm having her learn how the Hozuki family jutsu of water transformation, so that if Samahata did find her unworthy, she won't be stabbed in the hand. Oh well, I suppose it's a relief that you're taking her safety seriously, Kinji said. So training. Where do you plan to have it? I'm thinking the area of MT Fuji. What? Kinji's voice turned to ice. The area around Fuji has a lot of water, while the air itself is dry. That will allow Yumi to train her water ninjutsu effectively. Not only that, but kids won't stand out as much with all the tourism. And there's a lot of empty space, as the place is mostly rocky hills. But the biggest reason is that it's only an hour out from Mustafa. Fine. You have my permission. And a small number of funds for the month-long trip. Yumi, go pack. And make sure to pack your laptop and phone to continue your schoolwork. Yumi nodded as she ran off. I assume that for most of the time, Yumi will be staying at your place? Correct. All right then. Please give me your contact information if we need to get in touch. Yumi was quick to gather her things, and both left in the same vehicle they arrived in. Izuku turned to Yumi. I'll send a message to the server to meet tomorrow afternoon. I'll then give Roku and Heavy various things to read and do while you and I train. That sound good? She nodded. Good. When they arrived back, it was late afternoon, and Yumi quickly set herself up in Izuku's room. So what's on the to-do list, sensei? She asked. We're going to Orochimaru's bunker, he said. Wait, that place? Yumi questioned. Why? Why not? I had planned on taking all three of you, once you had learned enough of the old language, that is, but now is an appropriate time. No, I mean, why go there? She asked. Oh. Well, I need to collect some scrolls for Roku and Heavy to learn from, and I need to get some more advanced ninjutsu scrolls for you, Izuku explained. They both left the apartment building and made their way to the forest the bunker sat under. Izuku walked down a path he had long memorized and stopped over a specific spot. He reached down and hoisted the door open. Izuku then looked at Yumi. Would you prefer ladies first, or should I just go? Yumi giggled a bit. You're quite the gentleman. She began to scale down the ladder, with Izuku following her. He made sure to close the hatch on his way down. Unknown to either of them, a kid in a school uniform noticed them entering the forest and followed them to the hatch. A pair of red eyes watched in disbelief as his former victim, full of confidence and with a friend, disappeared into the ground. Wow! Yumi exclaimed as she looked around the torchlit hall. Don't get too excited, this place is small, Izuku said. Orochimaru used to have many bases, many times larger than this one. Yumi followed after Izuku. They came upon a door that, while Yumi couldn't read, Izuku could. And with his new Sharingan, he no longer had to painstakingly write out word for word slowly. He could memorize entire scrolls with a glance, before translating the words in his mind and writing out the scrolls in modern Japanese. Photographic memory does have its perks. Izuku opened up the door and made his way to water-style scrolls. He pulled out an assortment of scrolls ranging from C ranks and B ranks to even a couple of A rank jutsu. Although the latter is for only after Yumi's chakra reserves increase substantially. Even with her affinity, a rank jutsu would still be out of reach for now. Once he had collected a couple dozen water ninjutsu, he left the ninjutsu section and put his hands in a cross formation. Shadow Clone Jutsu. A second Izuku popped into existence. He nodded to the clone, who went off to the Kenjutsu section. What was that? Yumi's voice asked from behind. Izuku looked at the young Hozuki. Shadow Clone. It's a jutsu that creates a temporary clone. Why don't you use it more often? She questioned. Chakra limitations. It's a B-rank ninjutsu because it splits your chakra right in half for a single clone. I can only make one safely, as two make me woozy. That, and the clones are rather fragile. A single good hit makes them poof out, Izuku explained. The best thing I can have them do is bookwork and studying, while I train my body. Izuku went off to the taijutsu section and copied off a few scrolls that Heavy would be interested in. Even if he doesn't regularly use these forms, knowing them would mean any future students of Heavy's would be able to learn them. The clone returned a minute after Izuku was done with the taijutsu scrolls. He walked up to the clone and gave it a light slap, dispelling the construct. Knowledge of various kenjutsu forms filled his mind. Izuku then turned to Yumi. I'm going to get a few blank scrolls. She nodded, following after him. They came to the living quarters where Izuku dug around in a few boxes he put there earlier. Yumi took a seat on the bed and watched him pull out a large sealing scroll with a dozen or so small blank scrolls. Izuku frowned. I'm running out of scrolls. I'll need to begin repurposing the old scrolls or start making my own. If I'm lucky, I might stumble upon the other base, but I can't rely on luck, he muttered under his breath. He piled the empty scrolls on top of the unfurled sealing scroll. He pushed chakra into his hand and slammed it into the scroll. Seal! The sudden yell caused Yumi to jump as the empty scrolls vanished. Alright, let's go, Yumi. I can write these at home. And the lighting was better at home, not that Izuku needed to say that. The torches made it dim. Damn Orochimaru for their sense of drama. Izuku heaved open the hatch and got out of the way for Yumi. She hopped out of the entrance and Izuku slammed the hatch shut. Let's get back. Yumi nodded. Hold it. A voice came up from behind them both. Izuku and Yumi turned and looked. Izuku narrowed his eyes. Yumi, allow me to introduce you. Hozuki Yumi, meet Bakugo Katsuki. Bakugo, meet Hozuki Yumi. Shut up, Deku. Bakugo growled, his fists popping in sparks. You don't get to talk to him like that. Yumi's voice was as cold as ice, as she began to subconsciously leak killing intent. Bakugo didn't seem to notice quite yet. Why not? He's quirkless, less than useless. In fact, why are you hanging around this loser at all? The blonde questioned. A dark look dawned on Yumi's face as her killing intent picked up a bit. And what if I said I was quirkless as well, with those teeth? Yeah, right. He muttered sarcastically, still not paying attention. These teeth aren't natural. I wasn't born with them. Then you're just as useless as Deku. Izuku took the time that the two were trading words to bite his thumb and swipe some blood on the hatch, activating the locking seal. Izuku hadn't needed to activate the seal previously, as nobody but his mother had known about the bunker's location. But now that Katsuki found out, sealing it shut was the best move. Without chakra, Bakugo wouldn't be able to get in. You want to say that again, you Gari wannabe? Yumi bit out. Izuku had told his students a few stories about famous shinobi. Who is Gari? Bakugo questioned. A legend who is your superior in every way, shape, and form. Whatever. What's down there, Deku? Must be pretty good if you actually went down despite your scaredy cat nature. Bakugo asked him. Something I worked hard for. Go away, Izuku said. Respect your betters, you damn nerd. Bakugo called out. I'm sorry, Izuku said as his Sharingan activated. Repeat that for me. Bakugo froze, both from the shock and from the killing intent coming off Yumi. You have a quirk? No, I still am genetically quirkless. What my eyes are unique to me alone. And to any children, I might one day have. Izuku explained, staring Bakugo down. Bakugo grit his teeth and threw his hand in an exploding punch. Only for his hand to hit a solid wall and the explosions to be nullified. The explosion user looked at the giant object that a second ago was on Izuku's back and was now in front of him. How did it not have a scratch? Uchiha reflection. The giant gunbai was pushed in Bakugo's face, only to glow and explode. I have to say, this thing is useful. Izuku thought to himself. The explosion was small, but it did scuff up Bakugo. He growled before throwing another, far more powerful fist. If it landed on a person, it would have left second-degree burns. But it simply hit the gunbai again, the explosion absorbed by the weapon. Bakugo stared at the scratchless surface. What is this? A gunbai, an indestructible creation of the Sage of Six Paths. It was commonly used by Madara Uchiha in combat, and now I am the fourth person to use it personally, Izuku said in a quiet tone. It absorbs energy and stores it. When I want to release the stored energy, I simply feed it a bit of chakra. Chakra? Bakugo was having an internal crisis. His strength, his power, it failed him. Against the weakest person he knew. What was happening? A combination energy of physical and spiritual. All humans on Earth have it, and tens of thousands of years ago, it was the dominant force of power. It slowly went extinct, but 2 years ago, it came back, with me as the first of a new generation. What you see in front of you is 2 years' worth of training. Izuku leaned forward. You're not a threat to me. You ceased being a threat after the first 2 months I trained. Why? Why are you so strong? He asked. Because I was once weak. And because I gave up on old dreams. Izuku looked upwards. I met a hero today. A top 50 hero. And he attacked me. Is that what heroes have been reduced to? I don't think I want to be a part of a system that allows attacks directly on children. It had been the final straw. Blastman attacking him had been the push to realize that heroes no longer mean anything. At least with Shinobi, you knew what you were signing up for. Katsuki could say nothing as he looked at his hands. You know something, Bakugo? Izuku's voice caused a twitch in the blonde. At one point I saw you as some strong ideal. Some goal to aspire to, but it's clear when faced with the opposite truth of what you believe in, you freeze up. Don't approach me or my people again. At least, not until you reevaluate what strength is to you, and what it truly means to be a hero. Izuku mounted the gunbai on his back, and walked away, Yumi following after. What was that? Yumi questioned her teacher. Katsuki Bakugo is an interesting person. He's prideful, violent, stubborn, and a list of many other things, Izuku said. He had told a few past stories of old friends and bullies during downtime with the others, who also shared similar stories. To the four of them, it was group therapy. No, why did you tell him all of that? Yumi demanded. Because Bakugo is an interesting person. He's got this sense of strength, but also a disregard for the rules so long as they don't personally affect him. The way he's spiraling, a hero is not the ideal job for him, Izuku explained. You want him to become a shinobi? Yumi asked, shocked by such an idea. Why? He was your bully, your tormentor. The main reason why you sought out others quirkless people like us, because what use is there holding on to hate for him? He's not worth the time or mental energy spent dwelling. And perhaps, I'm not hedging my bets on him, not on his stubborn attitude. Either he re-examines his view on heroes and becomes what could be considered a true hero, or he abandons heroes entirely and joins our group. Izuku shrugged. But why? Izuku fixed her a stare. Shibuki. The exploding blade. It's correctly in Orochimaru's second base. When I find it, it will need to be wielded by someone who can act in tandem with explosions. He's the easiest person for me to convert. Not only that, but Bakugo, given the right direction, can gain a certain type of bloodlust. After all, not every ninja swordsman of the mist was born with the specific bloodlust needed to be a ninja swordsman. And what happens if he chooses not to go our way? Yumi questioned. And how do we keep him from spilling his guts? We find somebody else. Explosive idiots with tastes for violence and bloodlust are a dime a dozen. And don't worry, I put a subtle genjutsu in his mind. It'll keep any thought of him telling others out of his mind. And until somebody breaks it with a pulse of chakra, he'll keep said genjutsu. After meeting Roku and Heavy, explaining the month-long trip where Izuku and Yumi will be training, and leaving them with a collection of scrolls to study, Izuku and Yumi used the money given by Kinji to rent a cheap single-room apartment for the month in one of the villages. It was a place that didn't ask for any identification and asked for money up front. At least the place had internet included for free. They also had to pass the hurdle that was Inko Midoriya. She didn't want Izuku to leave for a full month, especially without adult supervision. But the argument was that both Inko and Roku had jobs they suddenly couldn't take time off from. So, they reached a compromise. Izuku and Yumi would only train at late night, long after everyone else, most villains included, had gone to sleep. It also helps that the small towns near Fuji were simple towns lacking any sort of nightlife, by extension, any large-scale night crime. But she did extract a promise from Izuku that he would call daily, and that she wouldn't go to sleep until he did. They left the house at roughly an hour to midnight. They wanted as much cover so that they couldn't be detected. And after 2 hours of high-speed travel, they arrived at their temporary home. Izuku sent a quick call to his mother to confirm that he was safe, and they found the key that had been hidden. Food was a priority, but they did pack some things to last a couple of days before they had to go shopping. And both knew the rather simple transformation jutsu, so passing themselves off as adults wouldn't be an issue. It was a small place, about 25 square meters in space. It also lacked any real furnishings, but at least had a single burner cooktop, a small refrigerator, and a sink. The bathroom was a single toilet, and if they wanted to bathe, they would have to go to the local bathhouse. But they packed smart, and included the only 2 futons the Midoriyas happened to have. Should we get settled in first, or should we move on to training? Izuku asked his student. Maybe we do both? Unpack quickly and scout out a training ground, Yumi proposed. Izuku nodded as they quickly dropped set up sleeping arrangements, with them on opposite sides of the room. They threw any food that needed refrigeration into the box, and locked the door on their way out. But just to be safe, Izuku thought to himself as he pulled out a pencil. Normally, he doesn't have any talent for sealing, but the Sharingan grants him the ability of photographic memory, so a simple locking seal on the door will keep out anyone without chakra. Unless they decided to destroy the building. He quickly drew the seal with a special chakra-enhanced item and activated it. The first thing they did was seek out a nearby body of water, small enough that nobody would fish it, and out of the way from any main roads. A quick satellite search located 3 possible locations that were out of sight, but within 10 minutes of travel from the rented apartment. They visited all 3 locations, and decided the second one they visited would be the best one to train at. That one also had a small patch of forest, so they could hunt for wild meat. The next thing they did before packing in for the night was locate a spot on MT Fuji away from any hiking trails. The rationale is that the air surrounding MT Fuji is relatively dry. Yumi would learn new water style near the body of water, and would practice jutsu she already knows at MT Fuji. A dry air environment means that her proficiency in water style will be forced to improve as her body adapts to the drain on chakra reserves. Using water style without a nearby source tends to do just that. Izuku and Yumi landed at the best spot they could find. To find them would require a pair of really strong binoculars from any of the pathways. Not that anybody could see them regardless. It was still very dark out. Should we do a bit of training? Yumi asked her teacher. Izuku nodded as he lit a couple of lanterns for light. Yes, but no more than an hour of it. Let's start with your water trumpet. Izuku slammed his hands down on the ground and used the most basic earth-style jutsu he knew. Earth-style, barrier. A small thin wall of earth rose out of the ground. This is the weakest, easiest earth-style ninjutsu to learn. Anybody, regardless of affinity, can learn it. I want you to continue attacking it with a water trumpet until you can break through it, Izuku said. Yumi nodded, gaining this fierce look. Water style, water trumpet. She ran through the hand seals and based the barrier. Because of the dryness in the air, she had to use more chakra for that single jutsu than she ever did before. The barrage hit the wall and soaked it a bit, but didn't do anything of note. Alright, Yumi thought to herself, what if I narrow the water stream that leaves my mouth? Whenever she used the jutsu, her mouth would form a pucker, as if she was about to kiss. Water style, water trumpet. Instead of a pucker, her lips flexed like she was biting them. This stream of water was narrower than usual, and came out much faster than before. It hit the wall, causing a large crack, and a bit of leaking on the other side. Izuku, who had been watching off to the side with his Sharingan active, blinked. Incredible, she managed to compress the focus of the water trumpet, without sacrificing more chakra. I wonder if she's a natural genius when it comes to water style. Good job, Yumi. Keep going until you successfully blast through. For the next 10 minutes, Izuku watched her chakra levels, making sure she wasn't close to reaching chakra exhaustion. But eventually, Yumi's practice and proficiency with the jutsu cleanly broke through the barrier. She pumped her fist in success. Yeses, she's only used a third of her capacity. In this case, that's bad as the dry air forced her to use more chakra for the same water. We'll have to speed up learning the Hozuki clan's water transformation jutsu so that she can try her hand at wielding Samahata. Izuka thought to himself, probably best I buy a large wash basin from a department store for her to sit in. That way she doesn't run the risk of losing any body parts. Alright, next we'll move on to some hand-to-hand. That alright? Izuka proposed. Why hand-to-hand? She asked him. You lost a third of your chakra when you were practicing. Best to let your reserves fill back up a bit before moving on to more jutsu, he explained. Now take your form. Izuku had given Yumi a couple of basic taijutsu forms to study, but they were rather basic. They were the equivalent of academy forms. But compared to some martial arts, she would wipe the floor with most, especially if you factored in her speed. They engaged in a 5-minute fight, where Izuku wouldn't attack, but parry all her blows, as even without his Sharingan, her movements were easily choreographed. His intentions were not to have her beat him, but to train her strength and speed. She was also learning how to fight on uneven ground, as the slope of Mt. Fuji proved an obstacle. Stop! They both stopped their training as physical exhaustion caught up with Yumi. Izuka flashed his Sharingan. Her chakra reserves haven't been refilled by much. I might have to give her a chakra pill every so often. He didn't want to do that based on the limited amount of pills, but they only had a month to catch up on the years of experience pro heroes had. It's a shame she didn't have the reserves necessary for even a single shadow clone, as the clone could have practiced chakra exercises while she trained her body in jutsu. Let's take a break for a quick snack. He pulled out a scroll from the bag he was carrying and unsealed a granola bar and some water. He handed both to Yumi, who was thankful. While she was eating, Izuka looked around the training spot. He had been developing shinobi instincts, and something about Mt. Fuji set off alarm bells to him, not ones of danger, but ones of deception, of secrets. He subtly activated his Sharingan and looked around. Residual chakra? That was odd. Chakra usually dispersed rather quickly. Not only that, but the chakra was seeped into parts of the soil, with a reddish hue to it. That meant the chakra wasn't human. And the Sharingan couldn't perceive nature energy, so it wasn't that either. He walked up to the largest patch of the reddish chakra. He placed his hand down on the ground and pushed a bit of his chakra into the spot. Nothing seemed to happen, as the red chakra neither dispersed nor intensified. Satisfied that he hadn't done anything wrong, he pushed more chakra in to see what would happen. Child curiosity at its finest. But after a solid minute of this, the red chakra momentarily pulsed, before subsiding. Oh, the scattered red chakra in the general area then seemed to collect in that one spot. But once done, it disappeared, sinking deep within the earth, far past the Sharingan's ability to perceive it. He took a few steps back. I really hope I didn't just trigger some kind of eruption. That was the worst-case scenario in his mind. He took a few steps back and rejoined Yumi, who looked at him confused. What was that about? She asked. Nothing of importance, he said, a bit too quickly. Now where were we? Training? Izuka nodded and mentally went over all the jutsu Yumi should know. He wanted to teach her some more defensive jutsu, but water style lacked lower-level ninjutsu of that type. The Wall of Water, for instance, was a B-rank ninjutsu, way beyond Yumi's current level. He might have to teach her the C-rank water armor jutsu. This jutsu was based on the lightning armor's defenses, but with its own twist. A small amount of water would stick to the body, moving to wherever chakra was applied. This created a thin shield that dispersed physical impacts. However, this jutsu was susceptible to lightning style, much like how the lightning armor was susceptible to wind style. And unlike the lightning armor, which covered the entire body weightlessly, water was heavy. You can't keep too much water on your body without potentially hampering your combat capabilities. Not only that, but if your reaction time was too slow, then the defense would be useless, as the water armor doesn't enhance your synapses response time, not like the lightning armor did. But most pro heroes were raw strength or raw power oriented. And the few who were fast instead were almost always within the top 20, like the current number 10 hero Edge Shot, or the number 5 hero Best Jeanist, both prime examples of speed over strength. No way would the Hozuki matriarch be able to call upon those. If it was still Blast Man, somebody who wasn't fast, just powerful, that Yumi would have to fight, then she'll have no trouble getting past him. Rumble suddenly, the ground started to shake, and the still-standing earth barrier from earlier crumbled to pieces. Shit! Izuka yelled out. He quickly grabbed his bag and jumped away, Yumi following him in fear. Sensei! What did you do? She screamed. I don't know! He screamed back as they put some distance from their original position. The ground near there started to melt, turning molten, as a large hand and arm reached upwards. The arm was coated in red fur. What is that? Izuku asked himself. The hand flexed as it felt around. When it hit solid ground, it flexed and pulled itself up. What was next to pop out of the ground was a large ape with massive tusks and 4 tails. That thing, it can't be. A tailed beast. He read about them in Orochimaru's journals. But Izuku, and Orochimaru by extension, had assumed that the tailed beast simply vanished, chakra scattering. They had all disappeared about a millennium and a half before Orochimaru's death, all at the same time. It wasn't hard to believe that they simply reached the end of life. If the Kyuubi could die by burning itself out, maybe the others had simply burned out with enough time. Clearly, they were both wrong. Yumi looked at him in shock, having heard his words, before turning to the 4 tails, still rising from the ground. It stretched and blinked sleepily. It yawned. It's nighttime? How long have I been asleep? Its deep voice seemed to move across the landscape. Izuku and Yumi took the time to hide by a large boulder. The tailed beast, the 4 tails, looked around confused. The entire landscape had visibly changed. Hills existed where they once didn't, and the mountain next to him was but a hill itself when he went to sleep. A powerful chakra awoke him. But he couldn't see anybody else in the area. He took a deep breath and sent out a quick pulse of chakra. Found you. I am the glorious Monkey King, Son Goku. I know a shinobi awoke me, show yourself. Son Goku yelled out. Are you completely crazy? Izuku exclaimed, stepping out from behind his hiding spot. No one else knows you're here. Hell, I stumbled upon you by accident. Your voice is like a massive broadcast to anyone within a 100 kilometers radius, so you're the one who awoke me. You certainly have guts, little child. The tail beast commented. This kid woke me up? I mean, he certainly has powerful chakra, but still. Did you not hear what I said? Izuku called out. Lower your voice, otherwise we're going to have military troops here within the hour. The tail beast seemed to sweat nervously. I'm confused. Didn't you intentionally wake me up? No. I said I stumbled upon you by accident. The tailed beasts have long been forgotten by history, so how do you think ordinary humans are going to react to a giant, four-tailed talking monkey? Izuku yelled at the Biju. Shit! The tailed beast bit out a curse, as it started to shrink in size. Instead of being the size of a 30-story skyscraper, it reduced its size to that of a 3-story building. Is this better? Sun asked. Izuku heaved out. Yes, it most certainly is. We're just lucky it's still nighttime, otherwise, people would have seen and heard you. Mt. Fuji is a popular tourist site. Mt. Fuji? What's that? Son Goku asked. The name of a mountain in the modern language. Izuku explained, rubbing the back of his head. Modern language? Wait, how long have I been asleep? Sun asked. Izuku looked away. The last shinobi to live, Orochimaru, died tens of thousands of years ago. It was only recently that I stumbled upon a base that once belonged to the Sannin. Tens of that long? The tailed beast had a hard time believing what he was hearing. Izuku nodded. Yes, the shinobi world is long gone, along with all public knowledge of that old world. In fact, I'm the first chakra user the world has seen since Orochimaru. I see. So, my fellow tailed beasts, and I have long since faded from memory? The tailed beast commented. Izuku nodded. A part of me simply wants to return to sleep, but a part also wishes to explore this new world. However, I also recognize the fallacy in such thinking. Would you allow me to accompany you for a time, the first of a new generation of shinobi? If only until I get an understanding of this world. The Biju asked. Izuku Midoriya, or Izuku given name, Midoriya family name. So long as you reduce your size further, and explain the dangers of your awakening, then I see no issue with that request. I'm certainly not powerful enough to refuse you. Izuku nervously laughed. No, that's not correct. Sun thought to himself. I can sense the chakra of an Uchiha on you. And from your powerful energy, I can tell you also have your Sharingan. While it's currently true that you can't stop me, it won't be for long. Sun, like his siblings, had an inherent distrust of Uchiha, but he could also tell the genuine nature of the young kid in front of him, based on his body language. Izuku looked towards the boulder he had been hiding from. You can come out now, Yumi. The Hozuki seemed to peek out from behind the boulder, shaking in fear. She flinched as she stared at the still rather large entity. This is one of my students, Yumi, a descendant of the Hozuki clan. We were out here on a training trip when I accidentally awoke you. Izuku explained. I see, not just one, but a whole new generation of shinobi. The tailed beast commented as he shrunk further, becoming no larger than a common house cat. Will this size be sufficient? Certainly. Although, I do wish to address something. You let off a mild chakra pulse earlier, correct? Sun nodded. Was the purpose simply to locate me? Well, no. It was also to awaken my siblings. Izuku blinked, looking at the tailed beast with a blank stare. Oh, are you all right? God damn it. Yumi and Sun flinched at the loud noise that suddenly emitted from Izuku's mouth. Clearly, his previous worst case wasn't bad enough. No, fate just had to prove him wrong. Having 8-tailed beasts running around is every definition of trouble. What the? How the hell do I deal with this? The moment the tailed beasts revealed themselves, they would inevitably draw the world of quirks to them, and worst case scenario, incite violence. And with the advanced weaponry available, humans as a whole would scramble to take down these monstrosities. After all, save for a few pro heroes worldwide, nobody would have the individual power necessary to take down a tailed beast safely, so the nuclear option it was. And somebody as strong as All Might be able to take down the 3 or 4 tails, but certainly not the 7 or 8 tails. Chapter 11, Bijou Unleashed. It wasn't known, but the Bijou scattered across the globe, trying to reduce the likelihood of being discovered. Some swam to new shores, others buried themselves underground. And for the ones who could do neither, they snuck aboard a ship. And it was proximity that determined awakenings. Rokubi, the nearest Bijou, the Rokubi, Saiken, was the first to awaken, having spread their slime within a nearby underground cavern far from any life. The hermaphrodite-like Bijou chose this spot for 2 reasons. The first and most obvious was that the deeper buried it was, the harder to find it would be. The second was to avoid killing all the wildlife with any of its acids. Bijou chakra had its roots in nature energy, so plants would easily filter trace amounts of it, but acid would simply kill everything. The scattered slime of the slug Bijou collected together and took the form of the 6 tails, which chose to stretch its body out, trying to reduce its lethargies. Saiken wants to explore, but Son Goku said it's a bad idea for Saiken to explore. Saiken will trust Son Goku for any further ideas. The slime said to itself. It had a weird thing about talking in the third person. Saiken curled on itself, falling asleep for a nap. Gobi. The next Bijou to awaken was Kokuo, the 5-tailed dolphin horse. Kokuo was a Bijou that took a liking to the surrounding waters of Japan, long before it broke off from the mainland back during the Shinobi era. The feminine-feeling Bijou had buried herself deep in the ocean floor, and had been dragged along when the earth shifted. When she awoke, Kokuo slowly raised from the ocean floor to glance around for any fishing vessels. While it could see the benefits of staying put, the hybrid felt that it had stayed under the ocean floor for long enough. It just needed to shrink its size and hitch a ride on a nearby boat. She gave a glance around and saw the dim light of a fishing boat. There, Kokuo swam to the small vessel and reduced its size as far as it could, ending up as large as a newborn kitten or puppy. This would allow her to avoid detection by modern humans until she got to land. Hachibi. At one point, northern China jutted out from the mainland, forming what was once the more northern, but still connected, elemental nations like the Land of Iron and the Land of Lightning. It's unknown how exactly the large landmass recombined with the mainland. It could be anything really, but what was more certain was the location of the Hachibi Gyuki. The octopus bull had chosen to bury itself near the home of its old and favorite, despite never admitting it, Jinchuriki. The once mountainous country was now just the 2 Hingdonling mountain ranges. When Gyuki emerged, there were reports of late-night or early-morning hikers reporting the large shadow to authorities, but they were too far and few between to send out any government workers. The Bijou shrunk himself down and looked across the darkened landscape. I should see if there's a nearby village, at least so I can get a frame of reference for this new world. He could see the logic of Sun, but at the same time, if he didn't know where he was, he would never find his way. Gyuki saw a decent-sized cluster of lights in the nighttime landscape and began the long trek there in his smaller size. Sanbai, the next Bijou to get the ping, was not interested in coming up for it. It remembered the last time it surfaced from a deep lake and wasn't keen on being captured again in such a fashion. Isubu had chosen to ignore the outside world in favor of being left alone, deep in the cold Siberian Lake Baikal. When he went to sleep, the lake was already one of the deepest, but now it was much deeper, so deep that enhanced humans couldn't survive the journey. Ichibi, the Ichibi, Shikaku, had discovered a massive desert, one many times greater than the Land of Wind. It would later be coined as the Sahara Desert, but at the time, it was simply a mass amount of sand, which made Shikaku powerful. It was daytime when he awoke, noting that fragments of himself had scattered across the landscape. This worked out well for him. Now he was both powerful, and with the small fragments of himself, he saw all in the desert. Nobody would ever be able to sneak up on him, and if they could, he would crush them. He stretched out his senses to get a feel for all the small animals a desert typically had, and even sensed a couple of large animals, and a human encampment a few miles away. Oh, it was so tempting to feed his bloodlust, but he also knew the risks of indiscriminately killing humans. It would be like a giant point-me sign. So, a compromise. He'd only kill humans within a half-mile range of him. Less likely he'll be found that way. Nanabai, the armored beetle Bijou, was the last to awaken. It had buried itself within the Amazon rainforest, having traveled via air to the smaller forest many thousands of years ago. It could even be contributed to the tailed beast's presence for the overabundance of plant life within what remained of the Amazon. But like Isabu, Chome had no desire to interact with this new world, electing to remain where it was. This was his spot, and he wouldn't move for anyone. Matatabi stretched out and shrunk herself down to the size of a house cat. She could sense the nearby settlements of humans, with the largest easily surpassing over 10 million, which in her mind was a ridiculous amount of people, more than the 5 great nations put together in terms of population. It was mid-afternoon where she was, with the sun bearing down overhead. Not that the heat bothered her. She was made of fire after all. What she was about to do was a stupid idea, but she was the older sibling, and therefore, wiser than Son Goku. Matatabi wanted to explore, to see this new world in its entirety. And she was going to get what she wanted. The blue cat ignored the nagging little voice that criticized her decision, which sounded a bit like Yujito, and headed out from where she buried herself. She started to run alongside the large road towards the largest settlement she could sense. She passed under a sign that she couldn't read but said, New York City, 10 miles. At the rate of travel, she would be there by the next hour. As a bijou, she did not tire from physical activity, nor did she need to replenish energy by eating. Not that she couldn't eat, she could. She just didn't need to. A few cars passed by her, going in both directions. Matatabi noted the similarities to personal vehicles that the shinobi world had, but these were far more advanced. Faster too. It made sense in a way. If civilians needed long-distance transport, they took public transit, and if shinobi needed transport, they simply ran. Shinobi were a lot faster than the average civilian. The Nakomata passed through a small rural town, but only stopped for a brief moment. Rural towns were boring to her, and the big villages were where the action was at. You could always find a colorful swath of characters. This did raise the question of all those, what she believed to be humans, with those physical deformities she saw in the small town. A small voice said she should have waited for Son Goku to first get a lay of this world, but her curiosity did get the better of her. She arrived on the outskirts of New York City, just as it was shifting from afternoon to evening. She was in a large neighborhood, filled with many homes and apartment buildings. It was an odd hybridization of the two. But it was noted that single homes had nicer vehicles, so they were likely more well-off than apartment dwellers. Halt, evildoer! Matatabi suddenly jumped from the loud noise and hastily turned around. What she saw made her jaw drop. It was a human, dressed in a brightly colored and gaudy set of clothes. He seemed to be approaching another man with a mask on and clawed hands, which were threatening the life of a bystander taken hostage. What the hell is that human wearing? The female-identified bijou had never seen such a clash of colors. An eyesore that would have made the great green beast might guy envious with how flashy it was. She ducked under a nearby bush, both to avoid the glare of the costume, as well as to see what was happening. She couldn't understand a word between the two people, something she'd have to fix, but it was some sort of confrontation. At least, until the gaudy man ran towards the man with the claws faster than he could react. Even Matatabi had a hard time keeping up. The clawed man was taken down with minimal effort, and the hostage was let go. The incident finished when a siren was heard in the distance, and a blue and white colored car showed up. What was most shocking was that Matatabi couldn't sense any chakra from the man with high speed. It was as if he was naturally that fast. What happened to humans since we all fell asleep? The Nakomata thought to herself. Maybe she should have waited for further information from Sun first. She slowly backed out of the bush, as if afraid the humans would suddenly notice her. Kitty! A little girl screamed, grabbing the two-tailed cat upwards. Matatabi let out a sudden screech as she tried to squirm out. A woman's voice called out, Lisa! Put the cat down! The apparent mother called out, rushing towards her daughter. The 4-year-old, startled by her mother, dropped the cat, who backed away, but did not leave for curiosity's sake. Lisa, what have I told you about picking up strange animals? The brown-haired, green-eyed kid looked down in shame. Not to, Mama. You need to be more careful. If you didn't have a stronger version of my quirk, you would have been burned, the mother said to her child. Matatabi meanwhile was having an internal crisis. Ordinary civilians couldn't touch her. That was a feature of her physiology that she alone possessed. The fire that came off her body was the external expression of chakra that she possessed. A shinobi could touch her because their active chakra networks provided a kind of shield against her chakra. Without the active network, a burn would begin to form on the body shortly. This needed further investigation. But how to get them to take the bijou along? Matatabi decided that a straightforward solution would be the best. She gave a soft meow and walked up to the girl's legs, twisting around her. This kind of action by normal cats would be seen as marking their property. Kitty likes me! Lisa squealed as she hugged the fire feline a second time. Matatabi resigned herself to the squeezing. Lisa! What did I just tell you? Not to. The child let the cat go. The woman gave a huff. Children. Let's go, Lisa. Your father is waiting at home with dinner. Okay. The mother-daughter pair began to walk away. Matatabi trekked along. The little girl heard the soft pattering of the animal. She turned around. Mama! Fire Kitty wants to come with. The woman turned back. She frowned. I'm not sure that's a good idea, Lisa. For all we know, it's been astray its entire life. What's that have to do with anything? Lisa asked. The mother's face contorted into a grimace. There were many things wrong with Astray, the first being rabies. The cat likely had never gotten any shots, was likely not fixed, and probably not even litter trained. But, as she looked upon her daughter's face, she could only see puppy dog eyes. She then looked at the cat. Well, it is on fire. I doubt any other animals are going to get close to it, so the likelihood of rabies and reproduction is almost zero. And with a higher body temperature, most diseases would simply burn out in the cat. Then there's also that fact that our family is fire resistant. The family of 3 all had fire type quirks. Alexander, the father, had a quirk that made him burst into flame whenever he got upset. As a result of his quirk, he tended to lash out in anger a lot. So, anger management and therapy were something he took. That's where he met Shelley, the mother. She was one of the few licensed therapists that could see him, on account of his fire quirk being dangerous for most people. Her quirk was a weaker version of Lisa's quirk, called fire resistance. Shelley would not feel the heat or flames as intensely as a normal human being. It was concluded she only felt 1,000th the feeling others did. She did consider being a firefighter, but decided mental health was more her passion. When it became apparent Shelley was falling for a patient, she referred him to another therapist with a fire-resistant quirk, albeit a little further away, and immediately afterward, asked him on a date. The dumbfounded look he had made for an amusing story at the wedding 3 years later. 2 years after that, Lisa was born into the world. Lisa, as it turns out, inherited fire resistance, only much stronger. That meant that Lisa was nearly immune to all things fire. Plus, everything we own is fireproof, so there wouldn't be any issue having a fire cat along. Shelley sighed. Alright, you win, Lisa. But if we find a missing poster for this cat, we turn it into its rightful owner. Deal? The little girl called out, squeezing the bijou again. I'ma name you Fluffy. No Kel, no Haley. Gaw. Why is naming so hard? The child called out. Shelley giggled a bit. Well, naming is hard. It took your father and I 2 months to come up with a good name. So, you don't have to name them quite yet. Maybe spend a few weeks to think up names first, okay? Okay, Mama. Common Kitty. Lisa said, carrying the cat with her. Whirr. Matatabi said, humiliated. Acting like a simple house cat was demeaning, but it would provide her an excellent cover as she got her bearings in this new world. Ah, the sacrifices some people must make. Yumi was in the middle of having a very early morning snack. Something akin to dinner, without it actually being dinner. After the training was abruptly cut short, she, her teacher, and the new tag-along all went to the cheap apartment that was rented on her father's dime. She tried to follow along with the conversation, but the few words she managed to pick up from Izuku weren't all that useful. She stifled a yawn. Both Izuku and Son Goku turned to her. Sorry, Izuku started. I should probably let you get some sleep. It's fine. It'll be difficult with both of you talking so loudly. She rubbed her head sleepily. Izuku turned back to Son Goku. Are you in favor of having this discussion after Yumi and I get some sleep? I suppose it would be unfair of me to try to work out arrangements while you are tired. Simply poke me on the shoulder when you next wake up, Son Goku said as he lied down on the table and curled his tails around his body. Izuku looked at Yumi and shrugged. Both then unrolled their sleeping mats and fell asleep, the night's events having drained them. When Izuku next woke up, it was a little after 1 in the afternoon. He pushed himself up and stretched. He looked at the clothes he hadn't bothered to take off. He and Yumi would have to do their own laundry without parental help around, but Izuku did know how to do laundry, something he helped his mother with once a week. He took one of his clean sets of clothes into the bathroom and switched out. When he walked out of the room, Yumi was just getting up herself, likely awoken by his commotion. Izuku walked over to the small table Son Goku had situated himself at and tapped the bijou on the shoulder. Son uncurled himself before stretching out his arms. Not a bad nap, all things considered, he commented. The ape looked at Izuku. So did you just wake up, or have you already eaten? Haven't eaten yet. Yumi and I will also need to get some more food. We only have a couple of days' worth. Very well then. Let us speak after food. An elderly bald man with a white bushy beard and yellow and black eyes walked down the street at a slow and methodical pace. It was his day off, so he took the time to just pace himself in the Mustafa prefecture, a place he didn't frequent often. It was a nice day to boot, so he wanted to enjoy it. Swish, swish, swish. Sounds like somebody is practicing the sword, the bald man thought to himself. He turned and looked towards a wooded area where the sounds had originated from. He couldn't see the practitioner from his position on the street, so he got closer to the designated area. As he peeked around a tree, he saw a clearing with a red-haired man in the center swinging a wooden sword. The elder watched his method for a minute, observing as the red-haired man swung his faux blade a few times, before glancing at a scroll propped up near him, only to swing a few more times. The elder slowly made his way around, avoiding the young man's gaze, before grabbing the scroll silently. "Let's see here," he mumbled to himself as he glanced at the scroll. The forms were unfamiliar, and the instructions seemed to mention something called chakra to enhance physical speed and strength. "Who's there?" The young man's voice came from the clearing, snapping the old man's attention from the scroll. The bald man peeked from his hiding spot. The younger man seemed in a defensive state with how tight his form was, and the fact that he switched from a wooden blade to an actual blade, which was curious as the elder didn't see any place for the real blade to be, nor could he see where the wooden one went. The fact that the swap was silent as well made him uneasy. The area then flooded with this feeling of fear, and had the old man been 15 years older or less experienced, he might have been scared. But it was relatively easy to brush off the feeling. His quirk, perhaps? He thought to himself. The black and yellow-eyed man pulled out a sword from under his slightly baggy clothing and unsheathed his blade. Even off duty, he was never without one of his blades. He took a silent step and swung down. And the red-haired man, with fast reflexes, turned around and caught the older man's blade with his own. "Who are you? And why did you take my training scroll?" The red-haired man asked the old man as they exchanged another blow. "Merely an old man passing through. I was alerted to the sounds of a swordsman hard at work. Rather impressive that you could parry my strikes like this. People twice your age have failed to do so," the bushy-bearded man said. They momentarily disengaged as the elder witnessed the younger's blade begin to glow blue. "Wait, is that his quirk? Not that feeling from earlier?" The red-haired man suddenly rushed forward, faster than before. So fast that the old man almost didn't see it. But when he brought his own sword up to block the strike, his blade cracked before shattering. The yellow and black eyes widened in shock. That had never happened before. His sword skills were so impressive that he managed to get through toughened armor of villains. That, and his quirk, single aspect enhancement, which allowed him to improve a single aspect of any item he touches, made it difficult to overcome the enhanced edge of his blade. The elder relaxed himself as he let the now broken blade fall to his side. The red-haired man didn't let his guard down, keeping his blade up for any sudden moves. Then, the geezer dropped to the ground in a kneeling position. "That's never happened before," he commented. "Have you ever considered being a hero with those skills of yours?" "No. Never went to a hero school, so I wouldn't be able to," the younger man said, slowly lowering his blade. "Well, there are remedial schools for heroes that are undergoing retraining, and there's a public test for vigilantes that should you pass, you'll get a license. They're both brutal, but I believe somebody of your skill could pass," the bearded man said in response. "Why, with your quirk, you could easily be top 10 within a few years." "I don't have a quirk." That threw the old man for a loop. "But that glowing blade is not a quirk," the younger man interrupted. "It is an ability all humans inherently possess, but requires the right kind of training to use, as well as the right body." "Oh, so somebody like myself could learn this?" the old man asked, intrigued. The red-haired man, now fully relaxed, let his sword hang from his hand at his side. "Theoretically, but I wouldn't recommend it. For one thing, my sword technique is an application of chakra. Not everyone has the physical capabilities to apply chakra as I do. And second, chakra is a combination of physical and mental energy mixing together. The point in time where you have the most chakra is during your physical prime. Between 20 and 35 is ideal, because once you're out of your prime, you slowly start to lose chakra." "Ah, so as an old man, even if I learned it, I would never be able to match the capabilities of somebody younger," he noted. "But I would still improve my skill set somewhat." "Yes and no. Learning chakra is best at a young age so that your power can grow faster. That means that somebody who's been using chakra since they were 8, but was as old as you would have many times more chakra than you do. And because chakra is part physical energy, if you run low on chakra, you run the risk of passing out from exhaustion," the redhead explained. "Ah, so as a pro hero, it would be a bigger detriment than a boon to wield chakra. A shame," the old man commented. "Wait, you're a pro hero?" The sword clattered to the ground as the red-haired man's fingers went numb. "I attacked a pro hero?" That second part was almost a whisper. The bald man waved him off. "And don't worry about it. I was the aggressor in this, so you have nothing to worry about." He dropped his hand back into a resting position. "I do believe my introduction is overdue. As of the past hero rankings, I am hero number 5, Yoroimusha." It took a moment for it to settle, but when it did, the redhead's face showed his shock. "Wait, one of the top 10 heroes? Holy shit, if Sensei were here, he'd be geeking out so much." "Your Sensei? Is it possible for me to meet him?" Yoroimusha asked. The redhead rubbed the back of his head. "I'm sorry, but he's on a month-long trip right now. He's going to be so disappointed to have missed out on this." He suddenly snapped to attention. "Where are my manners? The name's Roku. A pleasure." Roku couldn't see it, but had a feeling the hero was smiling under that beard of his. "It is always good to see budding young men and their diligent work. And it is my day off, so if you want, I could overlook your training for a bit, give you some advice, correct your forms a bit, that kind of thing. You would do that? The pro nodded. I'd be honored, sir. Newly debuted hero, Maruko, heard the sounds of fists meeting flesh. She smirked as she jumped towards the entrance of a nearby alleyway. Within she could see a woman scared for her life huddled in a corner, as a kid beat up a couple of men. "Ya brat! Get out of our way!" One of them screamed out as he was pushed into a wall. "Yeah, we just wanted her purse," the second said. "It does not matter. Preying on the weak is a sign of cowardice, and it is my duty to protect those who cannot protect themselves," the bull-haired cut kid with the larger-than-average eyebrows said. "My name is Heavy, and I will stop you both." One of the crooks threw a sloppy punch that Heavy parried before returning his own much stronger punch to the man's gut, dropping him to the ground. A second tried to hit the kid over the head with a metal bat, only for him to duck, roll, and deliver a solid kick to his solar plexus. As the two men groaned from the ground, Heavy turned to the woman, who had her back to the wall. "Are you all right, ma'am?" She hesitantly nodded. "All right then, please call the police then, and then run. It will take them some time to get back up, so hopefully the police arrive in time. But just to be sure," Heavy peeked in the nearby dumpsters and grabbed some old tossed-out runs of copper wiring. "While it is a shame that whoever threw this out did not think to simply recycle it, I'll make good use of it," he commented as he wrapped the thief's arms and legs together. "There, that will be a large delay." He turned to the lady, who had pulled out her phone and was on the dialer. "I was never here," he said as he hopped onto a fire escape. Maruko, from the alleyway entrance, made haste to follow him up to the roof of the building. When she arrived at the top, she saw him about to hop to a nearby roof. "Hey! Stop!" The boy turned around, took one look at the hero, and promptly started to run across the roofs. "Vigilantism is illegal, you know. Puts us, hard-working heroes, out of business," she said with a smirk. She ran after him. "Man, you're fast. I apologize to Hiro-san, but I am not a vigilante. To do so would require the use of my quirk, of which I have none," Heavy commented as he sped up a bit more. "Bullshit. You're what? 8? There's no way a kid like you could take down 2 fully grown adults without a quirk, no matter how weak they are." She pushed the muscles in her legs to move faster. At the end of the line of buildings, Heavy surged chakra into his legs and jumped, clearing the divide. Maruko, suddenly pushed by this action, felt her own muscles pulse as she made the same jump. "There's no way you did that without a quirk. Just give up, turn yourself in, and I'll put in a good word with the police." As tempting as that offer is, I would only sully the name of my sensei that way, and the name of the shinobi. I vehemently refuse. The rabid hero's grin turned feral, as she pushed all her strength to her legs and gained a sudden boost. She slid in front of Heavy, halting his progression. "When I said you ain't leaving, you ain't leaving." Heavy suddenly took a stance, with his arms in an X cross. Maruko raised an eyebrow. "The hell you think you're doing?" she asked. "Come on, Heavy, you can do this," he thought to himself. "You're a genius of hard work, so you can do this." First gate, a vein bulged from his head, gate of opening. He felt strength rush through his body. "I did it!" Heavy brought his fists to his sides, before rushing towards Maruko. Her eyes widened in shock. "He's really fast," she explained as she barely dodged his punch. It was quickly followed up with a kick that Maruko was forced to block. The kick was like the kid's name, Heavy. If he were a few years older, that would have really hurt, she thought to herself as she skidded back. Her muscles pulsed as she jumped up before spinning her leg down on the boy. Better aim for his non-vitals. "I ain't trying to kill him." Luna arc. Before she could make contact with Heavy, he sidestepped her attack and elbowed her in the solar plexus as she momentarily shifted herself. She dropped to a knee, taking in deep breaths. She fought through the pain and looked up to see Heavy was gone. She growled. "Damn it all. I had him," she huffed. "If we ever meet again, kid, I promise you, I'll take you down before you can escape. I promise you as the hero Maruko." Yumi sat in her tub, practicing the water transformation jutsu of her ancestors. "So she's learning that Hozuki family jutsu?" Son asked Izuku. He nodded. "Yep. I'm hoping that when she learns this jutsu, she can then be tested by Samahata." "Aw, the Samahata." There was a tone in Son Goku's voice. "I remember that blade, not too fondly." "Really?" Izuku asked. "Could you tell me about it?" Son looked away for a moment, seemingly contemplating the idea. "Fine. That blade was wielded by Kisame Hashigaki, the Akatsuki member who captured my Jinchuriki, Rashi." "Really?" "Orochimaru's journals never mentioned that." "Yeah, that tracks. Orochimaru wasn't a part of the Akatsuki at that time, so why would he know about that? Everyone involved, save for me, was dead and gone by the time Orochimaru began to document the shinobi world." Son had read 2 of Orochimaru's journals, the ones Izuku had on his person at the time. He pointed out a few mistakes in the writing, but did note almost all of it was correct. Izuku and Sun turned their attention back to Yumi. Izuku flashed his Sharingan. Yumi, your chakra levels are low. Stop practicing. Get out, get a bite to eat, and relax for an hour. We'll pick this back up later. Yumi opened her eyes and nodded her head. She hopped out of the tub and went to grab a granola bar that Izuku purchased from the local grocery store earlier that day. This is tiring, I know, Yumi, Izuku said. But by the end of the month, you'll be strong. Strong enough to defeat a seasoned pro hero? She asked. Strong enough to be a shinobi. And being a shinobi means using underhanded tactics to win. By the end of the week, she succeeded with the family jutsu, allowing her to turn into water and back again. It was something to celebrate, so Izuku, with the help of Sun's lava, made a makeshift barbecue meal in the dead of night at their training ground. After she had her fill and was given time to digest some of her meal, Izuku pulled out the scroll labeled Samahata. Alright, Yumi, you've learned the jutsu. And while you aren't yet a master, unable to take the second form, you can use the first on command. According to the Hozuki Jutsu scroll, the water transformation had two set forms. The first was a transformation on command. That meant that a Hozuki was human until they decided they weren't. And the second form was solid water. It allowed them to retain their human features and shape, but made them immune to physical attacks, even when caught unaware. Each form had its advantages and disadvantages. The first form was the less chakra-intensive form, but required you to keep your guard up. The second form was the better protected but required a lot of chakra to keep active, while also keeping your water levels up as dehydration was possible. Neither form was immune to lightning style, but the second form was much weaker to said element, and a particularly strong jutsu could paralyze one in the second form for hours, days, or even weeks. Its wife Yu Hozuki even used the second form regularly. Too dangerous when in combat with an unknown opponent. Now we'll see if Samahata accepts you as its wielder. Izuku broke the time freeze seal on the scroll and unfurled it. He laid it down and slammed his hand on the seal. What came out of the seal was unexpected. It was Samahata, but all shrunken and shriveled. Son, think you could help me here? I don't think I have enough chakra to get Samahata to healthy again. On the ground, Samahata let loose a few weak clicks. Seems it was aware enough to understand Izuku. Forgive me. My name is Izuku Midoriya. I am not going to be your wielder, but rather I'm hoping a student of mine, Yumi Hozuki, can be your wielder instead. The blade gave a few more clicks. I'm sorry, I don't quite understand you, but I hope that was an acknowledgement that you'll at least let her try. But before that, Son Goku, the Four Tails, will give you some chakra. Just enough that you can return to being in a healthy state. It clicked a few more times, before going still. Son Goku took a few hesitant steps forward, before having one of his tails slowly crawl toward the shriveled blade. I'm uncomfortable with this. The moment the tail touched the blade, it shivered, as some color started to return, and the blade regrew to its original size. Alright, that's enough, Son said suddenly, as he ripped his tail away. He hated that thing. Izuku looked at Yumi. She was staring at the now healthy blade. Well, go on. She took a few steps forward and bent down, grasping the handle in her hand. Samahata had begun to wildly click, but did not move at all. It's siphoning my chakra, she commented. That's normal. It needs to see if you're compatible, Izuku explained. This process lasted a few minutes, but when it was over, Yumi suddenly felt dizzy. What's happening? If it's accepted you, it's probably feeding you chakra now. I suggest you lie down, as you'll be dizzy for a few minutes. But don't let go. We need your reserves to grow, Izuku commanded, with Yumi following through. He activated his Sharingan to watch the chakra transfer process. Samahata began to move, wrapping its body to overlay Yumi's. It clicked more, and shivered a bit, before straightening out. It gave a couple more clicks, this time to Yumi. Really? You can speak to it? Izuku asked. Yeah, she says that my chakra, while not the tastiest, is highly compatible, and is content to be my blade until my successor arrives, Yumi says from the ground. How do you feel? Izuku asks, shutting off his Sharingan. Like I can take on the world, she said while jumping up with a sudden burst of energy. You want to try summoning? Izuku asked her. Really? Yes, Yumi exclaimed. See, calm down, Yumi. First, you know the signs? Izuku asked her. Yep. Was watching you whenever you summoned, Yumi said. Alright, before you try to summon, prepare yourself. Why? Yumi questioned. Because your summon may be water-based, and you might be summoned under a body of water. Kisame Hashigaki had shark summons after all, Izuku explained. Yumi took a deep breath, channeling chakra to her lungs to make that breath last longer. She bit her thumb and ran through the sequence. She then disappeared in a puff of smoke. Are you sure that was smart? Son asked him. Positive. The summons aren't going to kill her, and with Samahata, she certainly won't drown, as the blade will merge with her to give her underwater breathing capabilities. No, I mean the language barrier. Samahata can translate for her. Both ways? Izuku started to sweat. Hopefully, you didn't think this though. Sun had a sweat drop as he said this. No, I did not. Izuku hung his head in shame. Well, you're the sensei. What are you going to do while she's gone? Do some self-training. Gotta keep up my routine. You? Izuku asked the Biju. Going to read through that language booklet you made for your students. I should have a decent grasp on the language after a couple of weeks of study. Biju had phenomenal memories, being near perfect, as they didn't have brains that could forget as organics could. Alright. But I should probably call my mother first, otherwise she'll worry. Yumi poofed into existence within a very large body of water. It was only for a moment that she struggled before a bubble of air encapsulated her. There she came face to face with an orca. She took one look at the fearsome whale and gained stars in her eyes. It opened its mouth. Are you perhaps one of the new prospect summoners? A female voice sounded on all sides of the bubble. Samahata translated for her. Oh, Yumi Hozuki, ma'am. Samahata translated again. You're lucky that your blade can translate for you, albeit with an accent. Otherwise, we'd be unable to converse. I am the boss of the Orca clan, Toadama. A pleasure, Yumi Hozuki. Izuku groaned as he got up. He ruffled his hair in frustration and muttered to himself as he crawled to where the food was in the small living space. Son Goku peeked an eye open. You alright? Not really. Had a bad sleep. Izuku said. You want to talk about it? The Biju asked. Not really, he said, munching on a chocolate-flavored granola bar. Sun took that as a sign to go back to sleep. Izuku absent-mindedly munched on the bar. He was still trying to process the revelations he had in his dreams. Or was it a nightmare? He was hoping that he wasn't what he thought he was, but life doesn't respect hopes. He glanced at his free hand. Indra's incarnation? Huh? Damn it all. He squeezed said hand in frustration. Well, it doesn't matter. I refuse to repeat everything he's ever done, even if I have to reject part of my very soul. Chapter 12, First Blood. How do you want to go about this, son? Izuku asked the walking disaster in the shape of an ape. The human sat at a small table in the cheap rental, glancing at the notebook to write a few things down. Well, I have a list I'd love to go through if that's alright. The great beast asked, getting a confirming nod. First, I'll need a list of significant events in history. I know you can't provide me with thorough details regarding the Shinobi era and what came immediately after, but a general layout would be helpful. Izuku nodded, jotting down the request. Alright, I'll compile a list of historical data collections that you can research on the internet. However, what you see in Orochimaru's journals is all I have regarding the Shinobi era. I'll let you look at the others when Yumi and I return though. Internet? Sun tilted his head in confusion. Izuku blinked at the Biju. You don't know what the internet is? But you had computers and such back then. Did a version of the internet never come to exist for you all? Son Goku shrugged. I was never big on all the technology, so I wouldn't know. Izuku blinked, trying to process that statement. Okay, Ad. Teach mass of sentient energy how to use a computer to the list. He shook his head, trying to dispel the future headaches he would feel. What else? Well, a place to stay would be nice. Son Goku requested. Done. Izuku offered. You can either stay at my place, or I can set you up at the base Orochimaru had. It's still well preserved. Although it is lacking in entertainment. Well, Sun started. I suppose your place wouldn't hurt. Izuku nodded. Alright, are there any dietary needs you want met? I know sentient masses of living energy don't need to eat, but nothing said you couldn't. Sun shrugged. I've never really tried before. But for my third thing, I need a world map to help locate my siblings wherever they are. Should be easy, Izuku said. Anything else? Could you give me language lessons? Sun asked. I need to know what language the world runs on. Izuku cringed a bit. That might be difficult. There are nearly 7,000 languages used today around the world. Unfortunately, I only know Japanese, the language used during the Shinobi era, and a little bit of English. You'd be better off learning from the internet. Sun recoiled as if in shock. That's wow. Okay, that's a lot. How many humans are there? About 13.5 billion. Izuku answered. Sun's jaw dropped. By my father's name. That is a lot of people. Almost 100 times more than all who lived in the 5 great nations at their peak. Izuku nodded. Alright. Anything else? Sun thought for a moment. No. I suppose I don't have any more requests at the moment. Can I get back to you if I think of anything later? Certainly, Izuku said. I shall leave you to it. I need to get some food. Son Goku took that as an opportunity to curl back up and sleep. After that conversation, Izuku made an impromptu grocery list and set out to grab all the items. Plus, a little extra food for Yumi if she either gains a contract or loses the chance. So a celebration or a comfort meal. Izuku left the store with 2 bags of food, wearing the disguise of a boring young adult with no distinct features. He made sure to take a slow, leisurely walk to avoid alerting any suspicious people. But as he was halfway back to the rented space, screams rang out in the small rural town. Izuku turned and saw a villain running amok. The man was dressed in a black hoodie and seemed to control the earth itself, destroying property as he went and attacking some of the citizens in his way. His target appeared to be one of the few banks in the town. "Where is the nearest hero?" one citizen called out. The police tried to take down the villain, but were unsuccessful at piercing the shifting earth with their low-caliber weapons. The villain laughed. "I made sure to keep an eye on the local heroes," he said in an amused tone. "Unfortunately for all of you, the 3 stationed here are out on assignments elsewhere, and the nearest hero is 30 minutes away." The villain's gloating seemed to cause more panic. Izuku quickly ducked into a private yard with a wall and dropped off his bags. "I shouldn't get involved, but simultaneously..." Izuku peeked over the wall, watching the villain cause havoc. "I can't just stand by and do nothing." Izuku burst the transformation and applied a new one. When Izuku jumped over the wall, he was dressed in an umbu cloak and wore an animal mask of a wolf. He quickly hopped to the villain and jumped in the way. The villain stopped. "What's this?" he taunted. "Some new sidekick on the scene? No, I would have noticed you earlier. You're a vigilante, aren't you?" Izuku remained calm. "You may call me Indra." The shinobi in training made sure not only to deepen his voice, but also to layer it over another voice to avoid anybody listening and later identifying him. "Well, Indra," the villain mocked, "you won't stand a chance against my geokinesis." Indra shook his head. "What a waste," he mumbled under his breath. "What was that?" the villain asked, putting his hand up to his ear. "I'm afraid you'll have to speak up." "Let me ask you something," Indra said, taking a step forward. "Why are you doing this? With a quirk like that, you could practically be anything. You could be licensed to use your quirk in a construction zone. Or you could be natural disaster relief. Or even a hero. That power could change so many lives. So why rob a bank?" The villain paused. Then he chuckled, which turned into full-blown laughter. "Help people? Why on earth would I do that? I have power, and in this world, the powerful take from the powerless. That's just how it is," the villain boasted. Indra's shoulders seemed to droop in resignation. "I see, so I won't feel as bad when the end result occurs." "Oh." The villain looked intrigued. "And what result is that?" "Your death." Indra's voice came out as cold steel. The villain looked at Indra for a moment before bursting into more laughter. "Ha ha 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 ha! My death? You must be dreaming," he mocked. "If anything, it's you who will die today." The two stared off for a tense second before the earth rose and moved to wrap around Indra's leg. He quickly jumped back and ran through hand seals. "Wind style, drilling air bullets." 6 air bullets ejected from Indra's mouth, drilling through the moving earth. At the last second, the villain pushed himself out of the bullet's trajectory. Indra landed on a house rooftop. "Wind versus earth," the villain mocked. "Okay, I'm game." Indra went to move through a new set of hand seals but stopped. "It would be problematic if somebody thought I had multiple quirks because I used fire style. Better stick to wind." His hands flew, and Indra jumped towards the villain. "Wind style, vacuum sphere." He spat out small bursts of air. The villain moved but was unsuccessful in not getting hurt, despite the earth being on his side. Multiple minor cuts littered his right arm and leg. He shifted the ground to create a dome around his body. Indra responded with another drilling air bullet as he landed on the ground. Suddenly, the dome sunk into the ground, taking the villain with it. Indra looked around, waiting for the moment the earthbender popped back up. Behind him, the villain silently rose and held a dagger of solidified earth. But when the dagger lodged in the shinobi's back, Indra burst into smoke, and a log appeared. The villain looked at the log in shock, only to receive a sucker punch from his side. The villain was thrown down the street, and had some soft earth rise to catch him. But before he could get up, Indra had already called out his next jutsu. "Wind style, vacuum great sphere." Rather than a handful of small attacks, one big one hit the villain dead on. He was sent flying into a wall, and broke his arm from the way it was bent backward. "Wait, wait!" the villain cried out in fear as it tried to stand up. "I surrender! I surrender! Please, just no more!" Indra slowly walked up to the villain, completely silent. When he was 2 feet before him, the villain looked the shinobi dead in the eyes, and saw no mercy in red Sharingan eyes. "Your personal opinion has been noted, but you aren't somebody who can be redeemed, no matter how hard someone else might try. I'll become a better person. I won't steal, and I'll make an honest living. I swear." The villain let off tears to sell the promise. Indra's body tone didn't shift, but he seemed to get angry after a moment. "You're lying. The moment I met your eyes, I could see within the depths of your mind. There are no secrets you can hide. The Sharingan eyes spun ominously under the wolf mask. The villain jolted, saying nothing. Fear was palpable as it leaked off like crashing waves. You've killed 8 people and 2 heroes in the past. Adding the one from today, you've killed 11. All for the sake of your worldview of powerful take from the powerless. Do you believe you can truly redeem yourself? The villain remained silent. Suddenly, the villain sniffed. Heroes don't kill. They don't. Tears flowed freely. Too bad I'm only a shinobi, Indra said. May the Shinigami have mercy on you because I won't. A kunai slipped from his sleeve and, in a fluid motion, lodged itself in the villain's head. The villain died before he even realized he was hit. Izuku stared at the body momentarily before letting off a fireball jutsu, both to burn the body unrecognizable and to clean the kunai of any fingerprints. He was out of sight of any nearby people and cameras, so he was in the clear. He turned and ran, picking up the groceries mid-stride. When Izuku returned to the rented space, his transformation burst, and he dropped the bags in a loud thud. The loud thud awoke Sun, who witnessed Izuku run into the bathroom and start to heave. The Bijou could hear the vomit splash. Izuku's head lifted, while still dripping from his mouth. He was a monster. And I killed him. Aye. Izuku murmured to himself. No hero was going to get there in time, and he would have killed more if he got free from police custody. I did the right thing, so why do I feel so awful? Sun approached Izuku, who was kneeling in front of the toilet. You've just taken your first life, haven't you? His tone was quiet. Izuku looked at Sun with dead eyes. He silently nodded his head. Sun took that as his cue to rub Izuku's back. While I personally don't have experience comforting people, I do recall the emotions my past Jinchuriki felt when they claimed their first lives. Tell me everything. Inko took the benefit of Izuku being out of the house to put in more hours and try to have a bit more of a social life, which included talking with Mitsuki again. The woman had been incensed when she realized that she and Inko weren't hanging out as much. Inko thought about how she could admit to what Mitsuki's son had done to Izuku, but anytime the blonde called her up, she just made a poor excuse and waved it off. However, there was paperwork that Inko needed to do, and it involved emergency contacts and guardians should something unfortunate happen. So, when Mitsuki called again, Inko decided to take her up on the offer for brunch. The two were sitting in a modestly packed cafe, and Mitsuki was making small talk while Inko just silently listened. Then the waiter came up. Is everything going well, ladies? The sophisticated man asked. Mitsuki grinned. Perfectly, Inko nodded. Yes. Oh, before you serve us the bill, separate checks, please. The man nodded and pretended not to notice Mitsuki's shocked expression when he walked away. Inko-chan, I said today would be my treat. The blonde whined. Sorry, Mitsuki, but I'd rather have a civil conversation without being weighed down by any money issues. Mitsuki's face went still as if trying to process what Inko had said. What happened? She finally asked after a tense moment. Inko looked away in shame. I've been going through my documents and affairs in case something were to happen to me, and I came across my list of people I trust to take care of Izuku in the case that I am medically unfit or pass away. I'm removing you and Masaru from my first pick of emergency guardians. Mitsuki stared at Inko. What? Why? The blonde's voice seemed to cause some of the other patrons to turn around and shush them. Mitsuki backed down in embarrassment. It's not anything you or Masaru did, Mitsuki, Inko said. Rather, it's for the mental well-being of Izuku that I worry about. Do you know why I pulled Izuku from the school system and switched him to homeschooling? No. Mitsuki drawled. Katsuki wouldn't tell us either. Guess I should have expected that. Inko muttered to herself. Well, Katsuki and a band of other students relentlessly bullied Izuku for being quirkless. Katsuki was the main aggressor. Inko explained with a tired tone. Mitsuki froze, trying to process that revelation. And then she started shaking before slamming a fist down. That damn brat. How dare he do such a thing? The others once again shushed the pair in the cafe. Oh, he is so going to get it when he returns from school. How dare he bully such a sweat, an innocent boy like Izuku for something he had no control over? Mitsuki murmured to herself, while Inko took a sip from her cup. Please go easy on him, Mitsuki. What Katsuki did was wrong, but strict corporal punishment isn't the answer. Ground him for a month, maybe take away birthday or Christmas presents, but please don't go overboard if you decide punishment. Inko asked. Mitsuki looked at Inko in shock. Why would you be for that? My brat bullied your kid. You should be angry. Inko looked down. I am, truly. But I don't have the heart to hurt others. That's partly why I never pushed for a career in minor heroics despite my quirk having practical uses on the human body. And it's also why I hesitated to discuss it with you until the last minute. Mitsuki looked away in shame. So that's it, huh? You can't trust that Katsuki won't hurt Izuku if Masaru and I take him in, is that it? Inko shook her head. No. Izuku is becoming stronger. Far stronger than I even expected. But I worry for his confidence that if he's regularly exposed to his bully, he'll retreat into his shell. Stronger? Mitsuki questioned. I want to explain, but I shouldn't, Inko said with a small smile. There are too many people. Your checks, the waiter said, finally returning with separate checks. Inko and Mitsuki looked at him, then at each other, and each pulled out a card from their wallets after glancing at the bill. They handed off the cards to the waiter, and he walked off. I guess I can't blame you, Inko-chan, Mitsuki said. Personally, I'd be more pissed off if the positions were reversed. Yeah. Inko nodded. Well, I hope the guy at the top of your list is good for Izuku's sake. Otherwise, I might jump from third place and claim custody regardless. Mitsuki joked. He is. He's a young man who was kicked out of his house when he was 16 for being quirkless, and there's a decent sum available to care for Izuku, so he doesn't have to worry about money if they're a bit frugal. In fact, we're having him over for dinner once a week. What Inko didn't explain was that the traditional dynamic between adults and children would be swapped. Roku practically worshipped the ground Izuku walked on. And why wouldn't he? For the first time, Roku had people he could trust and power he could call his own. Well, Mitsuki leaned back. At least Izuku will have somebody in his corner who understands him. Poof. Yumi blinked as she appeared back on the mountain she was summoned from. It was late afternoon, the sun just poking the horizon. She looked around before breathing a sigh of relief and dropping to the ground in exhaustion. The past 4 days were hectic. Toyotama had her fight in water combat for 3 days straight. The only reason Yumi didn't drop dead from exhaustion or lack of nourishment was Samahata. The user and the sword had performed their first ever merger, which was weird. Also, an interesting side effect after the merger was that she now had gills at the base of her neck. They weren't big enough to fully support her need for oxygen, but it would buy her time if somebody trapped her in water. Not that that was likely to happen. Who traps a master of water style in water? She felt like a nap was in order. Her eyes drooped closed before she could stop herself, and she began to snore lightly. It was late at night when she opened them again, and the moon was well in the night sky. How long had she been out? Samahata's chittering told her. She jolted upwards. Nearly 10 hours? How had she slept that long, especially on uneven and rough terrain? Then she stopped and thought about it. Shinobi had to get rest wherever they could. Yumi's sweat dropped a little. I guess I'm becoming more of a shinobi every day. She jumped from the ground and dusted herself off. Using the moonlight, she saw the mountain range and headed toward the temporary quarters she and Izuku shared. She took off in a chakra-enhanced jump. She arrived back in 15 minutes and looked around for any prying eyes. She knocked on the door a few times, then slipped in. As her eyes adjusted to the sudden light difference, she noted Izuku writing things down in a scroll. Laying next to him was one of the triplet wolves. They were chewing on some hard dog treat. Izuku looked up. Aw, Yumi, welcome back. How did it go? Yumi puffed up her chest in pride. Well, since you ask so nicely, you're looking at the newest summoner of Orcus. Izuku blinked. Killer whales? Yumi only nodded. Neat. I've had an uneventful time here. So let me cook you up something. You like meat? Yumi grinned, showing off her teeth. What shark ain't a carnivore? Yumi pretended not to notice, but there seemed to be a change in Izuku. Whatever, it wasn't her business if he didn't want to share. That's all for today's episode of What If Quirkless Deku Unlocks Chakra Control and Sharingan from a Secret Book. The story is just beginning, and there's so much more to come as Deku's journey unfolds. Remember, the next part will be uploaded once we hit 200 likes, so be sure to like, subscribe, and tap the bell icon to stay updated. In the meantime, check out this other amazing story. Just click on it, and I'll see you there.